You're live, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Members of Council, welcome. It is the special council meeting, special council agenda. It's our budget workshop number 2. It's just after 12 o'clock. I'm sorry, we're a little bit later than we wanted to be, but it's 7 minutes after the hour, so we'll get things started here. We've got a couple of guests joining us right away, so let's just get right to that. Council, I want to ask for approval of the agenda with one small amendment. Item 3.5, I've added to my paper agenda. It's simply going to be a full update from the Treasury. Our treasurer and our deputy treasurer, perhaps our CAO, will have some comments right at the end of the, after all of the staff presentations. I understand Kelly, our treasurer, has would like to give us a full update on the workshop. So council, if you're just going to note that, Madam Clerk, note 3.5 is added. So at this point, then I'll look for a mover and seconder on the approval of the agenda. Recommendation be it resolved, the Council of the Township of Clearview hereby approve the budget workshop number 2 agenda as amended, dated April, I wish, November 29th, 2021 as presented. Mover seconder, please. Mr. Walker, Mr. Broderick, thank you very much. Any questions? Seeing none, I'll call the motion. All those in favor? Thank you very much. That carries. Sorry for my confusion. Disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Obviously, it's a budget discussion. All of us are citizens and residents of Clearview. Thank you. No declarations of pecuniary. Thank you. If anything comes up, obviously, we deal with it at that time. Item 3 is our department budget presentations. We'll go right to 3.1, opening remarks from Kelly McDonald and or our CAO. We'll go right to Kelly first. Kelly, our treasurer, do you have anything you'd like to add before we move directly to our first presentation? Good afternoon, Kelly.
Good afternoon, Your Worship. Thank you, through Your Worship, to members of council. I'm going to do a very brief update right now and then give you a full update at the end of the meeting once you've heard all of the presentations. I think it'll be a little bit easier to get a whole scope of it. So we started our last meeting, or left off our last meeting, with a net tax increase of 4.74. Since then, the county has now set their increase at 2%, and that relates to a 5.01 net Clearview tax increase as of today. And I am going to have the presenters. We've got the NVCA is here to present their 2022 proposed budget. And we'll have the Clearview Public Library do their budget. And then we've got our entire public works department, so water, sewer, and transportation services. And then once we're complete that, I'll ask His Worship to pass it back to me, and I will do a brief slideshow showing you different information of where we are right now. And then it'll go back into council's hands for some discussion and direction.
Thank you very much, Kelly. Again, thank you for updating us. So council, as we start, we're at a 5.01% net tax increase, and we're going to continue down this path and hear what some of the other presenters are. So we're going to move straight. Thank you, Kelly. We'll get back to you in a minute. Welcome, Mr. CAO. Okay, so let's go right to our NVCA, Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority. I understand Doug Havner, CAO, is here. Cheryl Flanagan, the Director of Corporate Services, and my friend, Marion McLeod, who is the NVCA Chair. Marion, nice to have you. I'll go right to you first. Good afternoon.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting the NVCA to speak to you. Cheryl and Doug, of course, our director and CAO, know the numbers inside out far better than I on what is coming, what they're going to say this afternoon. I would first of all bring greetings to my old stomping grounds of Clearview Township, now in Collingwood, of course, and also want to say thank you to Clearview Township for the support and to the hard work that you all do when it comes to conservation. Of course, Councillor Patterson sits on the NVCA. It was nice to see you on Friday through Zoom, Councillor Patterson. And that is pretty much all I have to say. We have able people, and there are a lot of challenges coming up for conservation authorities, which I'm sure that Doug and Cheryl are going to tell you about. There has been some very interesting conversations that have been taking place behind the scenes with Conservation Ontario, which represents the 36 conservation authorities across Ontario and the provincial government, and some very helpful changes have been made to the plans that came forward a year ago. And so I will hand it over to our very able CAO and director.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. McLeod. It's great to have you join us as always, and thank you for your great comments about beautiful Clearview Township. All right, thanks, Marion. Let's go straight to Doug and Cheryl. I guess, Mr. CAO, Doug, are you going to lead the entire presentation then? Is that the way we're going to do this, Doug?
Through the mayor, it's going to be a tag team. I'll take the first 10 slides and Cheryl will finish. And if you could have our slide deck brought up, that'd be great. Okay,
I believe our clerk's department will be handling that. And so what we're doing is we'll just pass the chair directly over to you. And at the end of your presentation, you can throw it back to me, and then we can have any discussion questions from members of council. So at this time, I'll pass it straight over to you, Mr. Havner. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks very much. Next slide, please. I just want to point out that when the process of investigating and looking into conservation authorities began by the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, to better present information to them, we created a program interview booklet. We've included that in our budget perspective that we sent on to you. The 2022 program overview is a short presse of our budget. It outlines some program material. If you haven't had a chance to look through it, I really encourage you to. It's a good, broad, simple Coles Notes version of our programming for the NVCA. Next slide, please. I'd like to touch on a few accomplishments before we get into the financial numbers. Our Watershed Science Department is the one department that really ties in all of the integrated watershed management that occurs in Simcoe, Dufferin, and Grey County, and those are the catchments of our watershed. In the 3,700 kilometers of area that we cover, science is vitally important. It's the measuring of data, the collection of data, and the use of that data to try to provide explanations for reasons that we are doing our work, and good KPIs, and they support the work that we do, and give you the confidence to move forward that we are indeed confirming our sources before we just begin. Our program manager is Ryan Post, and he's led by our director, Chris Hibbard. Next slide, please. The education program, as a result of COVID for the last 2 years, has been very, very hard hit. In 2020, we had no delivery of programming whatsoever at the NVCA. Again, in 2021, we were hit very hard at the first part of the season. We did run a very successful camp for young campers at Tiffin this fall. We had 400 people participating. It's one of those programs that relies heavily on levy. And as we go through those discussions in the ensuing transition period from December 31st this year until December 31st, 2023, we'll be hitting on some of those points. The programs that don't receive levy don't have any other sources than levy as their finance can be quite challenging. Education recovers a lot of its programming, but still requires some nominal seed money to get it going. And it's an important program. We deliver programming to over 14,000 students in Simcoe County, and we're tied right into the curriculum of Simcoe County at the grade 4 level. Next slide, please. Stewardship and restoration are also the lifeblood of the watershed. Stewardship does the majority of its work along the streams. We are a riverine system that run from the Oak Ridges Moraine up north to the Georgian Bay Basin. The only part of our catchment that doesn't run into the Nottawasaga is over in the Collingwood area with Black Ash Creek, Pretty River, and the Bateau running into Georgian Bay and not running into the Nottawasaga first. We've done a lion's share of our work the last 2 years down in the southern end of the catchment in Agilitas. There we were very successful in remediating a cattle operation that was crossing the river system. This is the headwaters for the Nottawasaga River, and it's the remarkable legacy resource for the Chinook salmon that are part of the really active fishery just to our north in Georgian Bay. We recently hosted an open house and had staff and funders and grant providers meet us out on the watershed. And the day that we were there, we were really fortunate to see Chinook salmon actually breeding right in the river basin. This project involved a cattle crossing, involved the reshoring of the bank, and partners like Somerville are just remarkable in providing us with woody material and snags to put in along those basin areas. The work that Fred Dobbs has done there is it's important to our entire area. It's important to Clearview. It's important to many of the municipalities. That resource of the sports fishing and the insinuating spend that occurs in the Collingwood, Wasaga Beach Basin is very, very important. And clean, healthy rivers are extremely important. Next slide, please. This is aspect of our business that sometimes we get some questions in Clearview about. It's our forestry program. This year we planted over 90,000 trees. In some years we're up as high as 250,000 trees. Last year we worked on 29 different properties, creating about 46 hectares of new forest. It's very important to note that we are not planting on prime agricultural land. None of the programming that we did for reforestation in managed forest plans involved class 1 or class 2 agricultural land. Most of the land levels that we work with range from class 5 to class 7, which are not as fertile and may benefit from tree cover. It's important to note that tree cover is vital to the flood control within our system as well. Science will support that a forest cover floor has the better success rate of catchment for waters laying on the soils and penetrating the soils than bare riparian banks, which also go on to degrading the river system. Important to note with our forestry program, we do rely heavily on outside sources other than our levy funding. And last year we generated $289,800 in funding, and the lion's share that came through our tree program that we work with Forest Ontario. In 2022, we'll be utilizing funding from Trees Canada. It's the first time in a number of years we've been able to source funds from that for tree planting. So we're very happy to report that. Next slide, please. Flood management has been identified as one of the Schedule 1 or Category 1 areas that conservation authorities should really be directing their work to. It's vitally important to us. Interesting point to note is that the current government reduced the funding to this program that they've identified as being extremely important to conservation authorities by 50% 2 years ago. And that funding has never been repatriated or placed back into our rota of funding. It's vitally important that we maintain a good control of flood mapping, hazard mapping, data mapping. There we need to reach out and work with our municipal partners in order to fund those types of improvements. One of the major systems that we're working on this year is a project over in Collingwood Basin on the Pretty River Dike. The Collingwood Pretty River is actually a dike system that is a flood control preventative measure. It was put in the early 70s, and over time has been penetrated and covered with herbaceous plant material, some invasive species, and a lot of tree woody material. So the friction points within that basin itself are becoming to the point where they may cause potential of flood risk. So this year we're working in conjunction with Collingwood through their funding of $100,000 to do tree removal maintenance and understory maintenance in the area. Fortunately, the catchment, or unfortunately, the catchment has a large number of native ash, and they've succumbed to the emerald ash borer. So it's a sort of a two-pronged approach. We're getting rid of an invasive pest out of that area while we're still making that area safe for water to pass through. Next slide, please. In planning and development, we work through a lot of acts. One of the things that it's important for council to remember is when you get those phone calls about, well, our permit's taking too long, or why do we have to wait, or why do we need the NVCA's opinions, you can see the great number of acts that we work through. We work through the Conservation Authorities Act, the Planning Act, and NEC, the Niagara Escarpment Planning and Development Act, the Aggregate Resource Act, the Green Energy Act, the Drainage Act, and the Environmental Assessment Act. And in many of those roles, we play a regulatory role where we are the entity that says no. And not everyone likes to hear no. it's not always beneficial to making a project move forward when you hear those short two letters. But it is something we don't take lightly. We do constant measurement throughout the year of our calc, which is a data point for managing files. It's worked through with the MECP to deliver a file within 90 days. Conservation Ontario has challenged that calc document to move to a 70-day delivery on the documents. On the 90-day delivery, we're currently delivering at 98%. And at the 70-day, we're currently delivering at 91%. And it's important that people realize that we're trying to do the best we can and allowing permits to flow quite regularly. Next slide, please. Our lands department is vital. We have 13,000 hectares in the area that involve green spaces. In your township, our beautiful Nottawasaga Bluffs are one of our most heavily visited areas. In the course of the next year, we hope to be putting in an expanded parking area there and a fee for parking to try to get those cars off the roads. In Clearview in particular, we've had some challenges with our roads being used as parking lots. So we're trying to aid and abet the engineering department and roads department as best we can in that regard. We're working currently up in the Blue Mountains to put in a parking lot area to accommodate access to the Bruce Trail. And for those of you that have been down to our Minising wetlands, we're working on a major drainage project there right now with the county. And at Tiffin, we're entertaining an odd source, but a different challenging source for revenue. When you get things cut back and programming gets changed, you have to look under different rocks. And what we're doing right now is we're having a movie set being set up at the Tiffin Center, and we're filming. It's the third time that we've filmed there, and it's been a good source of revenue for us, and it's been an outside the box look for us for sure on that. Our lands department is also faced with another challenge, which many municipalities face as well, as I mentioned earlier, is that emerald ash borer. The infestation is really marching across Simcoe County, and it's now starting to make a move into black ash, which is a really heavily situated on the riparian banks of many of our rivers and streams. Thing to keep in mind here is that hazard tree. So if we have public walkways and egresses into the forest, that we are aware that these trees can just fall. I was walking last week and had a 14-inch ash drop about 100 meters in front of me in a trail. If I would have been there and not paying attention, it would have taken me out quite quickly. They are death traps, and we've been working diligently to monitor and remove as best we can on a limited budget. Next slide, please. Looking forward, you can't look forward without looking back. And what's just happened in the last little while was the passing of Regulation 686-21, 687-21, and 688-21. And it's important to understand the transition aspect. On December 1st, I'll be sending out to all the CAOs in the watershed our transition plan. Our initial transition plan will be the skeleton document that lays out how we propose to move through the transition period. It is important to note that at the bewitching hour of December 31st, 2021, nothing really changes towards how the budget process works. 2022 will continue to be a very much status quo budget as we have presented it. 2023, we'll make a move through the transition period, and we'll probably see a reduction in some of the Schedule 2 and Schedule 3 items that we'll see reductions in levy. That's something we're prepared to work through. Some major timelines that we'll be working through in 2022 will be February 28th, the skeleton document or the starting point for discussions on programs and services. And these will involve very detailed financial information for council to review. We'll be working with CAOs and financial staff within the municipalities to go over programming and explain costs and funding. There'll be both the opportunity for the political sphere to look at the documents and as well as the staff level. Important to note that in the new work that came out, the regulations aspect, They have identified that water resource and integrated resource management is important. We have to provide a strategic plan for that. We're in a pretty good form for this right now, in that we just completed a 20-year horizon on the watershed. We've also supported that with operational and strategic plans over a 5-year period that come through to fruition in 2024. So we're marching along pretty collectively. In the past year, we've done a really good forensic look at our 2021 budget and tried to evaluate the Category 1, Category 2, Category 3 costs that will be used as we develop budgets moving forward. And I think that's important for council to be aware of. The work that's going on is a real opportunity for the conservation authorities in Ontario to truly partner with our municipal members. We're certainly not hesitant to get involved in good discussions and have you better understand the finances. One of the things that I've said when I've been doing these projects is that this all started with trying to reduce red tape. I mentioned to our board on Friday, it may have reduced some red tape, but it's simply replaced the red tape with blue ribbons. And there's a lot of blue ribbons in this legislation because there's a lot of work to do. So as I put it forward, as budgets coming forward, some of these changes may cause a reduction in budget costs. Some of these changes may well cost an increase. So our $5 million future budget may be $4 million. It may be $6 million. It's really going to be the evaluation of the programming and how it moves through. So I'm going to turn this over to Cheryl now and have her take you through the financial aspects of our 2022 budget. So Cheryl, if you would, please.
Thank you. And through your worship to council, can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So a bit about the budget pressures. The first one I know hit municipalities as well, and it's a topic I think we're all sick of hearing, and that's the COVID pandemic. The loss of revenue has been devastating for many organizations. That includes the NVCA. We were able to reduce some of our expenditures to allow us to cover for some of the losses. However, for 2021, we are still anticipating a bit of a deficit. So we had to think of that as we move forward into 2022, because it's going to take some time to build things back up. We host weddings at Tiffin as a way to increase some revenues to help offset some levy. But we've lost that revenue in 2020. We've had a few small weddings in 2021, and we're not quite sure what's going to happen in 2022, especially with this new strain that they've announced in the last couple of days. So we had to make sure we were thinking of all of this when we move forward with our 2022 budget. The provincial transfer payment, I say this a lot. I feel like a hamster on a wheel when I talk about this. Doug mentioned this a little bit earlier, and how they cut our funding a couple of years ago by about 50%. And they're not looking to increase it back up to what it was. Basically, what they've done is they've transferred that responsibility down onto the municipalities. I should note that after I created this PowerPoint, I realized that the MNRF has recently went through a name change, and it's now the Ministry of Northern Development, Mines and Natural Resources and Forestry, or MNDMNRF. So that's, even though we are affiliated with the MECP now, MNRF has maintained the responsibility for our flood program. The rest of those are stuff that you're all very familiar with. At your council, things increasing, property taxes, maintenance costs, software support. However, the largest increase of uncontrollable costs that the NVCA is seeing right now is our insurance premiums. We saw in 2021 an unbudgeted, unexpected increase of 17.4% to our insurance premiums. We then had an additional 4.6% increase that we were expecting based on the increase of our values and new buildings or whatever that we may have had. So that was a total of a 22% increase. That hit us hard in 2021 because it wasn't budgeted for, and like I said, we lost a lot of revenue. But we had to make sure that we budgeted for it in 2022, because not only do we now have to increase our budgeted amount by 22%. We then had to increase it by an additional percentage to make sure that we covered any increases that occurred in 2022. We have been told by our broker that we are anticipating an approximately 10% increase, but that's what they told us the year before too. So I'm not 100% sure where we're going to stand. It's important to note that the NVCA is part of the Conservation Ontario Insurance Committee. So what that means is we go in as a group of conservation authorities. So we get higher number of coverage, more people involved, more properties involved, and we get discounts through that. So we are definitely still getting the best insurance premiums we can. However, they have increased. And of course, they've increased primarily due to a lot of payouts related to natural hazards like flooding, like what's happening in BC right now. That has caused a challenge in recent years, including climate change. Can I get the next slide, please? So how are we addressing some of these pressures? Well, first, staff always look at a 3-year trend. We look at what the last 3 years have looked like between budgeted and actuals. This year was a little bit more challenging because we have a couple of years that are a bit skewed because of the pandemic, but it still allows us to see a good picture of trends. We've also continued to not fill a permanent full-time position, instead budgeting for a contract person. We've looked at all of our revenues and expenditures to see where we could find either additional revenue or save on some of our expenses. And then staff went to the board of directors in August with a guideline for creating the 2022 budget, where we requested a $90,000 increase to the general levy. Staff went back to the Excel spreadsheets and got us an increase of $89,768, which is just below the board approved amount. That went to our board in September, and it was approved for distribution for the 30-day consultation period with our municipal partners. The NVCA does recognize, though, that 30 days can be a little short for some of our municipal partners. Not everybody meets every week for council meetings. So the NVCA has a 60-day timeline, and then it's brought back to the board on December the 10th for final approval. Can I get the next slide, please? So I understand this is a little bit challenging to read, and I do apologize, but this is the information that we receive from MECP each year that shows the apportionment percentage for each municipality. If you look at Clearview, you'll see that 100% of your municipality is in the NVCA jurisdiction. You see your municipal population, as well as municipal population that is within the CA jurisdiction, and then the CVA associated with that, and then the CVA-based apportionment percentage. So what that means is, in this case, Clearview is paying about 4.88% of the NVCA's total levy. It's also important to note that while the MPAC has frozen numbers or growth, these numbers did still change slightly from 2019 or from last year's numbers, because MPAC, there's new growth, assessments done on current buildings due to construction or addition of other buildings that increases the values. So even though MPAC has frozen their numbers, the CVA has changed year over year, and that's why you may see a difference from what was last year's percentage. Next slide, please. So for 2022, the NVCA is looking at an increase of your levy of $4,117. That's from 2021's approved budget of $125,440 for a total of $129,557. Next slide, please. So leveraging your funds. So for Clearview's investment of just over $129,000, we include the other municipalities in their levy. which makes up a total of about 50% of our total revenue. We then go out to the province and they give us it's around $90,000 now. And then we also see if there's grants that we can apply for. Same thing with federal. Federal, we go out and we apply for as many grants as we can. And then there's also grants that we go out that are non-government related. So other NGOs, et cetera, that provide grants, private companies where we write grant applications to be able to get some money. And then we also have the revenue that the NVCA earns through whether it's planning and permitting fees, the development charges, or through things like our weddings, where we try to get some extra money. So the other partners investment is almost 5 million, just under that at 4.965 million, for a total budget of just over 5 million at $5,095,130. Next slide, please. So we always want to make sure that we're cognizant of how our levy impacts the watershed residents, and we strive to keep our numbers as reasonable as possible. 2022 does see a small increase to now $13.03 per watershed resident, and that's increased from $12.62. So it's a 41-cent increase year over year. And you can see there, this is a graph that's actually in our program overview that Doug spoke about at the beginning of the presentation, that talks about how the money is broken out from a levy perspective to all the our programs. Next slide, please. So we also compare our levy, to the current value assessment as a way to check how we are doing with keeping our levy fair. And you'll see that while 2022's budget does see an 8 cent per $100,000 of levy increase over 2021, which is now $4.78, it's still below where we were just 2 or 3 years ago. So the NVCA is, really trying to be cognizant of what we're charging to our municipalities. Next slide, please. So our asset management, asset management plan is now completely phased in. Clearview's 2022 asset management contribution is being asked at $6,733, which is down just slightly from $6,872 in 2021. That's due to some savings that staff were able to have, as well as being able to push back some asset purchases to other years. And you can see there just some of the scheduled capital projects that we have coming up in 2022. The NVCA Board of Directors approved our 2022 asset management plan at the August 2021 board meeting. Next slide, please. So my final slide just shows you a comparison of the 2021 approved levy from both operating and asset to the 2022 proposed levy. There is an increase in the operating levy that I spoke about, a slight decrease in the asset management levy, for a total request of $136,290, which is a requested increase of $3,978. Next slide, please. So that is the end of our presentation. And Mayor, I will turn it back over to you.
Oops, I just pressed the wrong button. It looks like I'm back on. Hello. Thank you very much for that, Cheryl and Doug, and Marion's also there too. So thank you very much for all that. Perhaps I'll, if I may, Mr. Havner, you broke up a little bit when you were talking about, at least you did to me anyway, digitally, in your presentation about the coming back to council to have a discussion about other services and how that financial impact will still need to be discussed. Could you just outline that again? That was about your 4th or 5th slide in.
Certainly, if I may, through your worship, that's in reference to the transition period from December 31st, 2021 until January 1st, 2024.
Right.
So what we'll be doing in that time frame is we'll be submitting 8 quarterly reports, and each one of those reports will be shared with our municipal partners. It will also involve ensuing dialogue with council and with staff to develop the programs and services. So essentially, at the end of this fiscal year, we're starting at ground zero and we're identifying Schedule 1, Schedule 2, Schedule 3 costs. So that's what the conversations will be about, Your Worship.
Okay, all right. We'll look forward to that. We'll see how that plays out. So at this time, then I'll go to members of council. If they have any questions or comments or asks, subtractions, etc., in this budget workshop session for the NVCA presentation. Yes, Mr. McKechnie will be first, then Mr. Broderick. Go ahead, Doug.
Thank you, Your Worship. So with regards to the Nottawasaga Bluffs and the parking there, and probably parking in a few other spots, how successful is that? Are we getting money for the parking there? I mean, I go and I park at various hiking points and I try and pay with my phone, and sometimes I get frustrated and sometimes it works and other times it doesn't. And I don't have an annual membership, but how successful are we at getting money when we do ask for the pay for parking in those spots?
Extremely successful. It's been it's basically matched our levy match for lands in what we're recovering in parking fees. Okay. So I'd say it's been very successful, sir.
Okay, no, that's good. Thanks. And maybe just to follow up. So I was copying down some numbers here. So basically, the increase we're looking at, what did I copy down? About 3.5%. Is that what I? Or 5%. I got two numbers here. Was it 3.5% or 5% that we're looking at? It's
just under 3%.
Okay, 3%. Okay, that was with my iPhone calculator, so just under 3%. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Yes, Cheryl, go ahead.
Sorry, through your worship, I just wanted to clarify as well. Clearview's has gone up slightly. So our overall ask is just under 3%, but based on your CVA apportionment, your township percentage has gone up a little bit more than the 3%. So even though our overall levy increase is 3%, based on the apportionment percentages, yours can either go up or down slightly, and that's why you're calculating a little higher.
Okay, I understand that now. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Broderick, Mr. Broderick, is that right? John, you're next.
Thank you, Your Worship. That answers my first question. My second question is, I noticed in the presentation that the town of the Blue Mountains is still referred to as Collingwood Township, and the township of Grey Highlands is referred to as the old Osprey Township. I'm just curious why that is.
Doug?
Through your worship, if I may, that's the nomenclature that we're being delivered by our MEC partners and Ministry of Environment. It's
okay.
their terminology. So
seems they're a little out of touch. Thank you.
Good observation, Councillor Broderick. Anybody else with any questions or comments to our NVCA partners? Yes, Mr. Langers. Hello, John.
Thank you, Your Worship. You're talking about putting a parking lot up on the trail on 124, or that?
We're through the chair, if I may.
Sure. Yes.
In response to your question, the parking lot would be a roadside adjacent to the bluffs. That's where we're looking to expand the parking lot there and get cars off of the road up that way. I hope that answers your question.
Chair McLeod, do you have something you want to add there?
Yeah, if I may clarify, this is the access point that is just on the backside of Singhampton, and the conservation area that runs between like the Pine Tree Side Road and the back of Singhampton. If that's helpful to you, Councillor Lemers.
Yeah, it is. Thanks.
That's at the south end of the conservation area of grounds. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay. Doug, Councillor Lamers, is that comfortable then?
Yeah, I was wondering if they were doing anything on 9 West in the valley. They have trying to think of who's got the trail through there.
Forgive me, I'm not sure just where you're speaking about there.
Up above Greenmore. There's a trail crossing up there.
Mr. McKechnie, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, if I could, maybe I could help out there. I think what Councillor Lemers talking about County Road 9 west of where the Bruce Trail goes through, and basically there's no parking, no designated parking, and that's you basically park on County Road 9, and yeah, so that's the Bruce Trail that goes through there, John. And my question also too is this new parking area that the NVCA are going to put in. I had in my mind that was at the Nottawasaga Bluffs when you come in from the Singhampton route, and there is sort of a little bit of a parking area there, and that's a dead end. But you're talking, are you, Doug, about or Marion, about on the Pine Tree Side Road? Is that where you're talking about putting the designated parking? It's the Pine Tree Side Road.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. Because I grew up there, I always get there from the Pine Tree Side Road. But the parking lot is the Nottawasaga Bluffs Conservation Authority, Nottawasaga Bluffs Conservation Area, which is on the backside. That, I believe, is where the parking lot is going to be increased. There's a little bit of parking there now, and there's an app, like there's a way you can use the app to pay for the parking there, and we're looking at an expansion of that parking lot. Yes, no parking planned as far as I understand it anyway. And Doug and Cheryl can correct me if I'm wrong, but no extra parking planned for the Pine Tree Side Road access point.
Oh, okay.
That's just my own spot.
we're getting to the same spot, but it's just that Marion's coming in from one direction and I'm coming in from the other direction, but we're ending up at the same lookout point. So,
that's right. Yeah, Glen place. Yeah.
I understand it. Okay, thank you.
All right. Perhaps Mr. CAO Havner, in the future, we could have some mapping to sort of clarify that. As a result of Clearview Township being an amalgamated township, we have a lot of roads actually across our township that are not named with the common nomenclature. They're named with digits and numbers and side roads, etc. So it's always helpful and always confusing. So thank you. Okay, any other members of council who could or have any questions or comments for the NVCA group? Okay, I just have one comment if I can for Cheryl, and that is that your part of your presentation talked about insurance. Insurance rates continue to go up. Certainly our township is no different than your organization, and seeing significant increases in our insurances as well. It's an ongoing challenge for sure, and at some point, I'm hoping that we can have a better risk assessment to better assess what the actual insurance rates are doing for us. I mean, I certainly appreciate that insurance companies need to make their assessments as to what type of, what type of lien that they're looking at, or what type of, issue or risk that they're facing. But somewhere along the line, I think we do need to reassess this, because it is climbing in the municipal sector as well as in your sector as well. So that's just my commentary on that. So hopefully we can have a better discussion in the future and find some better insurance rates. Anybody else? All right. If there's nothing further, I want to thank members of the NVCA who have brought forward your information, and council will consider to continue to consider our budget for 2022. And I guess at this time we can thank you and wish you a good day, and we will move on in our agenda.
Through the mayor, thank you very much. And just a hello to John Ferguson and welcome aboard. That's going to meet with you later this week, so I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, great.
Yes, through your worship. Thank you, Doug. I appreciate your comments, and I look forward to meeting with you as well.
All right. Thank you, NVCA team. All the best. Members of council, we're going to move on then to our Clearview Public Library. It's 3.3 on our agenda. Our CEO, Jennifer LaChapelle, is with us. There she is. Hello, Jennifer.
Hi.
Nice to see you. And I know you've got a bit of a presentation to talk to us about library operations. So I'll pass the chair directly over to you. You can do your presentation, and then council will have questions.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I see that our clerk is setting up this PowerPoint presentation. Thank you. Okay, so Your Worship and members of council, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity again to come before you with the board's 2022 to 2027 budget. I'll be concentrating on some of our successes for 2021, discussing changes that you're going to see in the 2022, 2023, and 2024 budget asks, and talking a little bit about what's new for 2022, and leaving lots of time for your questions and comments. Next screen, please, Sasha. One of the programs that we're proudest of at Clearview Public Library is our participation in Georgian Bay Reads, which is now in its 12th year. And it is a program run by 5 libraries on Georgian Bay. And it's based on CBC's Canada Reads program. This year, Clearview Public Library was a successful winner with our book, Heartberries by Teresa Marie Mailhut, and it was defended by our wonderful volunteer, Kieran Rupke. This is, I think, the second or third time we've won, and because we won this year, next year we will be hosting the event. This is also the first time that this particular event has been virtual, and we're really hoping that next year we can run it in person. But whether it's virtual or whether it's in person next year, it is scheduled for Saturday, October 22nd. And I highly recommend it as an event for all of council and staff to participate in. Next slide, please. The other thing that we're really excited about in 2021 is the fact that the new Steiner branch has won the Ontario Library Association's Library Architectural and Design Transformation Awards. We are one of 3 winners. The other 2 were the University of Toronto and Windsor Public Library. So you can see that we can certainly hold our own in Clearview Township with our cohorts across the province. And as we speak, the magazine Canadian Architect is writing an article on our new addition to our library system, and it should be coming out within the next few months. And tomorrow morning, I'll be speaking to the journalist who's preparing that. Can I have the next slide, please? So our operating budget and capital budgets for 2022, one of the things you're going to see is that the Clearview Public Library Board has permanently eliminated overdue fines. We're still collecting other forms of revenue, such as printing, faxing, and if you lose a book, you have to pay for it, fines. But we're going to eliminate these fines. Now, we have not charged these fines for 2020 or 2021 because of the pandemic, and we're joining an ever-growing community of public libraries trending towards eliminating fines. When we look at eliminating fines, what do fines do? Well, fines really are a detriment to community members. They disproportionately impact families with young children, newcomers, and visible minorities. They're not a sustainable revenue model because they go up and down, and frankly, they've been trending down over the last 10 years. And with more people using our digital collections, for which there are no fines, it's not a revenue stream that you're going to be able to quantify over the long term. There's also evidence showing that there's a direct correlation between the elimination of fines and the increase in circulation of our materials and active library members. So it's a good thing to do. One of the things that wasn't included in the Steiner Branch building project was signage. And this was largely due as a response to trying to keep the project budget manageable and palatable. So we would like to move forward with bringing signage into the Steiner branch, and we've put money in the budget for that. And it will include the library's branding, which was approved by the board and council a few years ago. In 2020, we had hoped to present to you our county-wide reciprocal borrowing agreement. Every public library in the county is on board with this, and I believe we would have had it up and going in 2020, except for the pandemic, where we all had to switch our resources and refocus on how to get our organizations through the pandemic and to go forward. However, I have been assured by other county public libraries that this is something that they too want to work on for 2020. And what will this give us? Well, it will mean that every Clearview Public Library member in good standing will be able to go and get a membership at any other public library in the county, which means that they would then have their resources to access. So think of all those extra materials that they'd be able to get, and they'd be able to get to their programming without any hindrance because they're not members, all at no cost to Clearview Township taxpayers. So that's a good thing. One of the things we have to do when we're managing our libraries is manage the buildings. And one of the things we've deemed that needs to be done in 2022 is replacing the blinds at the Creemore branch in the public areas and the staff work areas. And we budgeted $2,000 for that. They have currently, they're the blinds from 1993 when the building opened. So it is certainly time to get a refresh there. We have input $2,000 into the 2022 operating budget for PPE costs because we anticipate that we are still going to have to do extra cleaning. We're going to have to provide gloves to our staff for some of the duties that they have to perform. And we are providing masks, adult and children's size masks for users coming into the library that don't come with their own masks because having a mask is mandatory. The last and the biggest ticket item for 2022 is an increase in staffing by $10,000. And the reason for this is that in 2020, when we had to move to virtual programming, we were doing okay. And what we found is that while many people are sick and tired of meeting us on Zoom, there has been an increase in a number of our programs because they've been virtual. And we know that the appetite for virtual programming is going to continue even after the pandemic. And so the board feels very strongly that we're going to have to deliver programs in two ways, but we simply don't have sufficient staffing to be able to do two types of programming at the same time. So we are asking for an additional $10,000, which would be used to increase existing staff's time. These are our part-time staff, so we're not looking at any benefits for them beyond statutory benefits, but they'd be getting a few more hours a week to assist the programmers in preparing materials and activities for the virtual aspect of our programs. And can I have the next slide, please? So in 2023, you'll be very happy to know that the new Lowell branch building loan will finish. I'll leave Kelly to tell you what month that is anticipated to happen in. But since the building opened in 2008, that's pretty good that the loan is going to complete by that point in time. One of the things we'd like to do in 2023 is, again, at the Creemore branch, we would like to replace the carpet. It's been in the branch for over 15 years. And it's starting to get worn and not look so good. But we figure by 2023, it will be worn to the point that it not only not looks good, but could possibly present a tripping hazard for staff and the public. So we would like to replace the carpeting in the main section of the library. Again, we've budgeted for some PPE cost, a little less. And again, if we don't have to use PPE, you will not see this expensed. And finally, for 2023, you will see virtual programming staffing costs continue. And the next slide for 2024, please. Something that we've noticed needs to be done at the new Lowell branch is we need to do something with the front doors. The front doors at the existing branch are the original doors of this 1925 building. When we opened in 2008, they had been uninstalled, totally refreshed, and then reinstalled. But we're finding that they're weathered and need, well, by 2024, they will need significant maintenance. We would like to replace them with glass doors because we think the extra light into the building will help people use the collection. The natural light will help people use the collection better. And we're a little concerned that since this is a one-person staffed facility, their ability to see directly out towards the front of the building would increase safety for the staff. We're anticipating no PPE costs in 2024, so that's a good thing. And our virtual programming would continue. And the widget you see at the bottom of the screen is for something new that through the coordination of Simcoe County Library Cooperative, we were able to obtain this year, and it's Press Reader. If you haven't used it, please go to our website and have a look at it. It provides access to over 7,500 newspapers and magazines from around the world. It's free streaming service for our patrons. You do have to have a membership to access it, but once you put in your membership information, you can access it from anywhere. You don't have to be at the library. You can be at work or at home or wherever. And it's almost addictive once you start looking at all these different news sites and magazines. You can lose a lot of time over it, but it's time well spent. Can I have the next slide, please? Going into 2022, what's new that's going to happen? Well, we opened our Stayner branch in 2020. But we're going to have our grand opening May 14th, 2022. And we have checked with Parks, Culture and Recreation because we will be using the Stayner Community Center, and the date is booked and we're fine for the date. We certainly hope that some of you will be able to, or better, all of you can attend this. And we're setting up various programs to go with this. And it will be our first real opportunity to showcase the new facility for the entire cohort of Clearview. Obviously, people have been coming in since we reopened in 2020, but we've had capacity limits following the provincial and health unit directives. And it will be great to just be able to really show everybody how wonderful this new facility is. You've heard me talk recently about the Simcoe County Regional Services Review as it affects library services. And I can advise you that all the libraries in Simcoe County are very happy that the recommendation coming from this committee has been to go with a modified status quo. So if the county accepts that, they'll still be looking at ways to make the Simcoe County Library Cooperative more efficient, but the cooperative will not be going extinct. And we will not be moving to a county system. Now, of course, this still has to be approved by county council, and it's 2021, anything could happen, but we're very hopeful that this is a positive move for Clearview Public Library, as well as all the other public libraries in Simcoe County. Can I have, something that we were going to do in 2021 as a board was review the operating hours for all the branches to try to determine, are there days, hours that would meet people's needs better than the current hours. And we realized as a group that the data we would be getting from 2020 and 2021 would not really help us to make good decisions in that regard. So this has been pushed forward to 2022. And that, can I have the next slide, please? And that wraps up my very short presentation, but I hope you have some interesting questions for me, some of which I'll have to take back to the board. But Your Worship, back to you.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. LaChapelle. It's always good to get an update and hear about all the great programming going on there, particularly some of the virtual work that's been going on. Members of council, do you have any questions to Jennifer in regards to the library proposed budget? Mr. McKechnie is first, then Mr. Broderick.
Thank you, Your Worship, and Jennifer, thank you. And to just one comment and one question. So the comment is to the rest of council that if you don't already have Press Reader, get it. It's the best value going. My wife has it, and as Jennifer says, it is addictive. I mean, and my wife will attest to that. It's addictive. There's almost every magazine that you can think of is on it. Anyway, the question that I have to Jennifer is the roof there at the library. Maybe this is something that I'm not sure. Maybe it's under Parks and Rec or whatever. But I noticed the snow comes off that roof at quite a clip. Is anything being done about that? Have you noticed that, Jennifer, where all of a sudden, like on a mild day, it'll be like an avalanche come off that roof? And I was thinking, if any kids are sitting under there, we're going to kill them. So.
Well, I can figure
Jennifer.
you, I might sit there, but okay. So Parks and Rec is certainly aware of this. And in fact, when the building was being designed, that was part of its design, to have the snow come off in that fashion. And when we get to landscaping, the concept is that there will be the way we landscape it would mean that nobody would be getting up towards the building that close. Okay. Now, something that we may be looking at, and I don't know whether we need to do it in 2022 or further down the road, and it wouldn't cost very much anyways, is having a V addition put on the roof at the eastern exit door, so that when the snow comes off, it doesn't just dump in front of the door, because of course that is a health and safety matter for the staff. You need to be able to open the door and exit in an emergency. But the roof was actually designed to do that. And I'm sure I speak for Terry Vachon in that we will ensure when the landscaping is done, that it's not done in such a way that kids would get up close to that anyways.
Okay. All right. Great. Well, I figured that was probably taken into consideration when they built the building, because I thought, well, because I watched the snow come off there one day, and I thought, well, that'd be a heck of a disaster if there were a couple of kids playing under there and such. So, but I'm sure that was taken into consideration. I see Terry's on there if he wants to comment.
Thanks, Doug. Hang on a second there. Don't go away. Mr. Vachon, just in support of what Jennifer's saying, have you got any comment on that?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, to you, to Councillor McKechnie. I also know that the original design of the building had it for a electric heat trace to be installed on that roof. And it was something that was omitted from the original construction. The hydro to plug in the heat trace is there, but it was something that the group thought that, once we got the library open and once we saw how the snow would come off that roof, it would be determined at that time if it's required to have that heat trace or not. So the more we look at it, the more we think about it, we might have to add that heat trace to that roof. So it kind of melts the water as it always goes. So you don't have that big drop of snow that can happen. So it might be something that we might have to budget in the future.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks, Terry, for that update. Is there any, yes, I think I had Mr. Broderick, is that correct? John, you're next. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Your Worship. And thank you for your presentation, Jennifer. That was awesome. I just wanted to touch on the landscaping for a minute. The Stainer branch, it has been deferred to the spring of 2022. And I was wondering, Jennifer, if you could give us your view of just how important the timely completion of that aesthetic is to the finishing of our new multi-award winning library.
Jennifer.
Councillor Broderick, to Your Worship. It's really important for us to have it completed. One, because we've had a lot of negative comments from people about the building looks great, but what the heck is going on the outside? So we don't want people walking away with a bad impression that way. But the other thing that's really important to us is that the design of the initial landscaping was intended for us to do outside programming. And with the pandemic, one thing we've learned is that no matter how big your building is, you want as much space between people you're doing programming with as humanly possible. So it's very important to us, especially even after the pandemic is gone. I don't think you're going to see people comfortable with being really tight with other people when we're doing programs. And I know we have always done outside programs in the summer. So it would be great if by summer of next year that was completed. And Madam Treasurer, you can speak to this, but I'm pretty sure the funds for the landscaping, which are actually in another department's budget, but I'm pretty sure that the funds for that are actually coming out of a reserve. It's not money that's coming out of 2022 tax dollars.
Jennifer, thank you. Kelly's here as well as Terry. So this is Another great example of how our departments all cooperate with each other, but they're all held to account to our treasurer. Madam Treasurer, what's the story there?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through Your Worship to Councillor Broderick. The original funding for the landscaping at the library has always been set from the proceeds of the sale of the old branch. So there is no taxation effect with those renovations.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Vachon, would you like to comment though on obviously the tendering for that work was rejected by council. Is there any further thought on how that may play out in 2022?
Sure, yes. So to answer that question specifically, Your Worship, yeah, I mean, the plan is to go out for tender again in the spring. If you recall, we only received one tender in 2021, one bid, sorry.
One bid,
so we're
yes.
hoping, yeah, one bid. So we're hoping to re-tender that project out and see what the prices come in at. I also wanted to comment on the landscaping to Councillor Broderick's question. Another issue that we're seeing with the lack of landscaping on that side of the building is we're having considerable drainage issues. So the way that landscaping is designed is to lift up the land so that the water comes off that roof and goes towards our ditches. What's happening right now, it's really pooling up. If you go there even today when the snow melts or on a rainy day, there's almost practically like a little lake on that whole side of that building. So the water isn't being drained properly. So the landscaping will obviously assist with the drainage of the water on that side of the library.
Thank you.
If I may ask then, Terry, are you and our staff, even through maybe even Public Works, are we doing anything to mitigate that through this winter? Because we don't want to cause any damage to the structure of the building with any excess water like that over the winter. What are we doing just to get that away right now?
Your Worship, I mean, I would have to gather the Public Works feedback, but to my knowledge, it's just the way that the ground is sloped there, it would be really difficult to drain that water. Like we don't know where it needs to go in that back field. So there's been no mitigation done to this point, but there will have to be in the springtime for sure to try to get that, to try to build some sort of sway or a ditch to get it out. But it is a big problem. There's a manhole there, but what happens is the manhole is actually higher than the ground. And we're trying not to spend too much money. As we know that we're hoping that the landscape will come into play in 2022. And we're trying not to spend too much money to mitigate and hopefully that then the natural path that the water will take will kind of solve itself. So, but we're going to keep a close eye, Your Worship.
Okay. All right. Well, certainly we have contingency funding available if you have to react immediately with any high water event, which may or may not occur. It seems that these things happen more often than they don't anymore. So we have to be aware of it. So thank you, Terry and Jennifer, for keeping an eye on that. All right. Is anybody else with any other questions to Jennifer in regards? Yes, Mr. Walker, how are you today?
Thank you, Your Worship. Jennifer, you talked about signage. Is that internal signage or is that funds you're looking at to work with Terry for the external signage at the end of the road as a joint venture to put a sign up there, electronic sign instead of the old manual operation? I just wanted some clarification on your signage budget.
Okay, so I was talking about internal signage in the actual branch itself.
And so as the last budget, I had asked to CAO to look at funds or finding out what a sign would cost, and I'd asked for a joint venture between the library and the recreation to pay for. So it's something that you might want to take back to the board to look at. I think it's an advantage to us to highlight being able to program such a sign as well as get the landscaping complete so that project is totally finished. I think it's important that we move forward with both of those if we possibly can, but the landscaping certainly needs to be done. The whole design, as you're right, was for the roof snow to slide off. At one point we had, I believe it was a couple of feet of stone along there for it to drain into. And then the the lands for learning were beyond that, safe distance away. That was the original setup and design. Far as the roof's concerned, over the door, you can buy those V-shaped deflectors that we could put on there, and that would eliminate that issue. Okay, so I think the board needs to at least talk about potential cost sharing with that sign externally, the electronic sign, whether it's this year or next year, but at least look at that in your budget for talks this year and maybe for next year.
Jennifer, is there anything further you want to add then about the signage? Because certainly the last council, as Councillor Walker pointed out, the last workshop session, we had that very discussion point. And your comments here about signage for the Stainer branch, not including in the building fund. So you're adding $5,000. Just for clarity, you say that is for internal signage. So these are
that is intended for internal signage. The board did not discuss external signage in terms of the sign at the road. I'm sure they would be happy to talk about that, but we need to talk to Terry about that too. So,
okay. If I may, then I think from Councillor Walker's motion in our last meeting that this would certainly be something for your 2023 discussions. Mm-hmm. I'd certainly ask you to make sure that you put that in the notes for your discussions. Okay.
Yep. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Anybody else with any other questions or comments for the library portion of our budget? I'd like to ask a question if I can. Mm-hmm. I'm very aware that the library staff do great outreach with the community and perhaps do some youth programming, either virtual with kits. I know during this, we've had some kit things put together, activity kits or learning kits and so on. And I just wanted to understand, frankly, the target audience that the staff in the library are working towards is rather similar in audience to the people at the youth center. So I'm wondering if you've ever had any coordination between the contents or the programming of each, because I do know of one family that accessed both, and they were very grateful to have both during that time when everybody was locked up at home. But I also think it's like we're doing double duty here, because we've got a library service offering a great learning kit, and then we've got the youth center offering a great learning kit. And I would hope that there's a level of cooperation and understanding and coordination between the two departments. Is there any thoughts to that, Jennifer?
I can address that. First, our programming is for everyone from preschool, in fact, babies, right up to seniors. So our actual group, it's a little broader than the youth center, but we do work with the youth center. My teen programmer works with them quite closely. We have materials at the youth center for kids to borrow. When things were normal, my teen programmer would go in there once a month. I believe now she's doing, when we get enough signed up, she does Zoom meetings with the youth center and the kids. So we certainly make, and the youth center, promotes what we're doing. We promote what they're doing, and we make sure that they have some of our kits if people aren't coming into the library to get them. And we also make sure that we're not doing the same things, so there's a duplication of effort. There's certainly a little difference in what we're doing, but we make sure that we are mindful that we're both targeting the same audience and that we work together in that way.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that, because I think that it's important that we do offer these services, but I think that we have to do it efficiently. So let's continue to work cooperatively and be efficient. And I thank you very much for that. If there's nothing further, I have one other question. I wrote it on a different page. I'm just going to flip back to see where I put that down. Oh, yes. I couldn't be more happy to hear that we're going to continue to pursue this countywide borrowing and countywide reciprocal borrowing agreement. As I understand it, library cards are going to be working right across the county at various libraries, and they're going to be associated with their home local lower tier municipality. And so that's a very positive program, and I look forward to hearing more about that cooperating with the county as well as our neighboring library services, which I think will help us resolve some of those border issues. And, you know, I'm really hopeful, Jennifer, that that's something that's going to continue.
Well, Your Worship, if I could just speak to that, the reason that we already have a number of cooperative agreements with other public libraries in the county, but the drive for this came because of the province cutting of interlibrary loan delivery service.
Yes.
And once everything had to go postal, which slowed everything up, it also meant that some libraries, including ourselves, said, okay, there are some types of material we are simply not going to circulate. It's costing too much money when you have to use Canada Post. So we thought if we move to this, it gives everybody the opportunity to use all of the materials throughout the county. You're not just stuck using whatever your particular municipality can afford to fund. So it opens up doors. It's just a fantastic way of dealing with the crap that came from the province. And I am very hopeful that once we get this instituted, it can be a model for other libraries across the province so that they as a group can start using this kind of model.
All right, perhaps outside of the budget process that we're in right now, Jennifer, perhaps if I could ask you to keep council updated on the progress of this. And we look forward to you coming to our council meetings and giving us an update from the library as well. So thank you.
Of course.
All right, any other members of council with any questions? All right, thank you, Jennifer, and thank you for your work, and our best regards to the board who are a volunteer board who continue to serve our community. So thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship.
All right, members of council, we're going to move on. We have item number 3.4. This is the Public Works budget coming up next. So we have lots of discussion here, lots of different departments within it. If you've reviewed the materials that Dan has put together along with Mike Ron, there are several different departments. So what I'm hoping we can do is we'll go through each department within the Public Works umbrella, and we'll sort of go for questions in each section of of their departmental responsibility. Oh, Todd's here too. Hi, Todd. Nice to see you. Good to see you join us. So, Mr. Ron, I'm going to start with you. You can take over the meeting and then direct the process from there. Again, I'll let you lead and then just put it back to me and we'll go for questions. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Your Worship. So thank you to council, the staff that are here, and if anybody's watching in the public, welcome to the Public Works budget. Our new Public Works Admin Assistant, Fawn Braden, is going to be actually running our slide presentation for us today. So if Fawn could throw there's Fawn. Hi, Fawn. Fawn could throw our presentation up on the screen, we'll get started. Just saying, this is my 20th year of presenting budgets to council, so it's becoming a little easier every year. The numbers are a lot higher than they were when I only looked after the water department, though.
Well, thank you and congratulations.
I don't see the presentation yet, Fawn.
Perhaps the clerk and Ms. Breeden. There we go.
All right.
Okay.
So let's go to the next slide. So the proposed budgets for council's consideration. Council's going to recognize many of the projects that we're discussing today. We certainly encourage questions, maybe wait till the end of each section. So if you look down the list there, so I'm going to talk about item 3, Mr. Pro, item 4, Mr. Patton, item 5 and 6. And of course, a lot of these items are going to interact. So that should be good. Next slide, Fawn, please. So this is what we do. Some of the councillors that have been here for a long time will recognize these objectives and actions as, well, a lot of them came right out of the 2008 strategic plan for the township. The newer plan, 2017 strat plan, is focused on other areas of the township, but there is a little note in there that the previous strategies and objectives should also be implemented, and in Public Works, well, a lot of those things we have to do.
that last bullet under actions is pretty key. So to utilize the expertise and technology to facilitate continuous improvement for this department, for the whole town to be successful, we rely on the expertise of like every employee and the input and expertise that they bring to the table. Next slide. So I think we're one too far. Yeah, we're just going to talk about this for a second. So council's aware Clearview's infrastructure needs are projected many years in advance. And most of the large projects are developer driven, and we work with the development community to ensure the infrastructure is available when needed. Next slide. So these are some of the critical projects we're working on right now in Stayner. You can see by that list, these are projects that have been in council meetings for a long time, some of them years. Out of that $60 million worth of work that we're building in the next couple of years, 85% of it, or 51 million, is being upfronted by the developers. You can imagine the amount of work it takes to design, review, build, right to the last brick in some instances, the amount of work it takes to do this. The $51 million that is being upfronted, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's entirely covered by the developer. So on these individual projects here, so Sunnydale Street, that's the Manortown project. On the next slide, I'm going to show you a map, but for some of these projects, you know, partially funded, we're going to have some funding from roads budget, some from water, some from servicing bylaws. There's a multitude of different revenue sources for these items. The Mowat Street intersection, for example, the developer is going to build it, but because it's part of the development charge background study, that road is built through roads DCs. So one developer is going to build it, but we need to pay the developer back all of that money. So these things start to add up. Next slide. So the main players here, right? When that previous slide we talked about, can you just go to the last slide for a second, Fawn, please? So I'm going to talk about here in a second. So Sunnydale Street and Phillips Street are tied together. The Mowat Street intersection, I'm going to talk about in a second. And also Margaret Street. So Sunnydale Street, Manortown, the Mowat Street intersection, Nottawasaga Station, and Margaret Street, the Ashton Meadows development. Those three developers prepaid and front-ended the money it took to design the Klondike Park Road water supply. So these developers have put up, you know, about $5 million in advance just so this project could be designed. So next slide, please. So when we look at this map, the estates of Clearview is the property that Nottawasaga Station is building on. Manortown Homes at the end of Sunnydale Street, sort of center right. Ashton Meadows at the lower end of the screen. Those developers have paid for the design of the Klondike Park water supply. The small circle in the middle of this screen, Dan and Todd are going to talk about their individual parts of that. Well, Dan more so. So Nottawasaga Station is going to build that intersection. So that's the corner of Mowat Street and Highway 26. All the other black ovals, so the little one top left, Fawn, can you just put your cursor over that? So that's Locke Avenue. We brought this to council for a couple of years. It's complicated. We want to fix that up for, you know, easier access to the school for the children. That project includes servicing bylaws, development charges, all different aspects of public works. All of those other circles are going to require servicing bylaws as our infrastructure expands. So on Margaret Street at Ashton Meadows, that long oval, there's some lots on the north side of Margaret Street. So as the developers build out our infrastructure, we need to ensure that those lots are serviced. In order to do that, the owners pay their fair share. The Sunnydale Street oval is the same. We've already gone through that with council. We're in the works of bringing some agreements to council within the next few weeks, we hope. And then the top circle, that checkerboard. Yeah. So let's back up a little bit. So Ashton Meadows, Manortown Homes, and Estates of Clearview have all been to the township for years, building infrastructure, asking for infrastructure, going through the planning process. Well, the economy now is such that we've got now Clearview Park beside that circle wants to move forward. Well, when they move forward, we also need to service these other development areas like this checkerboard subdivision. We're going to ask the developer to service this, and we're going to back charge the owners of those properties, in which case they'll actually be able to use those properties. Bridle Park on the left side of the screen has new owners. They're now at the table as well, asking for infrastructure, offering to support the build of the water line coming in from Klondike Park Road. And the amount of work it takes to bring one of these subdivisions online typically takes years. Because of the economy, there's a fairly aggressive push to move forward. Any questions about this? This is a lot. There's a lot going on in Stayner. You know, the budget projections in the millions of, well, tens of millions. No questions?
Mike, let me just jump in on you. Just leave this up, Fawn. Members of council, if you have any questions about the Stayner development sort of projects that have been ongoing, since we've got them all here on the map. Again, these are all the large major ones that are ongoing. There are other, respectfully calling them a little bit smaller. There's certainly some work going on in Quebec Street that's not on here, but there's no direct impact to us at the taxpayers right now on that. They're continuing to do the work there, and they're within their design work at this time. But these are all the projects that are in front of us in Stayner specifically. So while we have the map up, is there anybody on council has any questions? I can't see you all, so just jump in and speak if you have anything to say.
And council may have questions at the end of the entire presentation as you know, Mr. Perot and Mr. Patton discuss some of these projects as well.
Okay, not hearing anything. Carry on, Mike.
All right, so again, there's a lot going on here. You know, Stayner could see between 200 and 300 houses per year being built in the near future. You know, we're accustomed to about 50. That'll obviously change our development implementation tactics and also your building department needs. So among other things, I think we're good there. Next slide. So I'm only going to talk about Stayner and Creemore today. There is discussion, there's interest, there's new owners in Ottawa, but for a 2022 budget, Creemore and Stayner are big topics. Stayner's, we've been working on infrastructure needs in Stayner for years. So kind of a theme, remember that all developers are paying 85% of the infrastructure costs in Stayner. In Creemore, council's going to see a number of familiar projects. So that well supply, we've been advising the well supply needs to be sorted out. We've been advising for years. It's been in our budget to assist if asked. All development in Clearview has always been developer driven, right? Debt capacity issues. We can't afford to build everything we need to service all of the settlement areas in Clearview. The developers understand this. You know, most of the costs that are listed here come from the DC background study. You'll see the brewery, the second bullet, the brewery pre-treatment force main. Now that comes to us from Tribute. We've suggested we would put that in there. We haven't agreed to fund that. Again, typically funding infrastructure for development is paid for by development, and I believe is a legal requirement under the Development Charges Act. Since the brewery is required to pay for all the overstrength operating costs under bylaw 1543, you know, they need to be part of a discussion about pre-treating brewery waste. They pay a large sum of money. We've advised them that that agreement needs to be amended. It's been 1 year we've been working with them. Letters went out today advising that we intend on limiting those numbers to their current maximum needs, but they're going to have 90 days to get back to us so that we can move forward with this entire Creamore sewer project. We need to get that done. Most of these projects require environmental assessment to be completed. So council recalls the environmental assessments we've done for water supply or even the southeast corner of Stainer. Like that's about a $200,000 per item cost. If we do a master servicing study, we can eliminate, you know, for $300,000, we can probably eliminate 2/3 of the EA costs for all these projects. I'm going to talk about that in a couple seconds. Actually, next slide. Let's do it now. Well, next slide after that. So here we show Alliance and here. Nope, stay there for a second. I forgot about this one, Fawn. So this is showing, you know, the big developments in Creamore, so to speak. There are other developments. Fawn, if you want to just hover around some of the open areas in Creamore. Yeah. So if you see an open area, you know, there's room for development, maybe not on the arena, but other areas like that. That's okay. In the southeast corner, Fawn, just put your cursor down over by the legend. Yeah. So there are properties over here that we've had interest in as well for development. I don't know that we're going to be able to develop out there, right? Like Americans speak to this more, but the population allocation from the county's municipal comprehensive review may limit where we're allowed to grow. Also, we're kind of restricted to what the existing Creamore sewer plant is expandable to. So this is going to be a challenge. The master servicing plan I talked about will address the infrastructure needs for everything. Let's go to the next slide now, Fawn. So if we just read through this list. So I talked about $200,000 per EA. That's about the cost of it. So master plan, we could do a master plan for Creamore, and on all those items, we can address the first two phases of the municipal class EA, right? All the public input, it will allow public engagement, which I know council likes. It will take a system-wide approach so that, you know, there may be one developer in town that has the means to advance faster than the rest of town, but as the municipality, we want to develop the town as a whole and ensure everything we build is going to be well operated, long lasting, and cost effective to operate. The last bullet here is pretty important. It does provide a guidance document. Now, a guidance document is going to be very critical in succession planning in this municipality. There are changes in the next few years, as there always are, but the amount of work that has to happen in Creamore, and now we've got, you know, a good developer, well, not that there was no good developers, but a developer that seems really interested in moving forward. We want to work with them and make sure this is all done right. What's the next slide? All right, so I'm just going to pause here for a second. So that if you look at the treasurer's budget summary report, you know, this department's seeking a 4.43% increase in the public works department's tax-based budget. You know, Mr. Pearl explained many of the projects have been deferred to keep this number in check. The water and sewer portion of the budget that Todd's going to talk about in more detail, most of those costs are attributed to rates. So when we do the water and sewer rate study, we look at a 10-year period, like a focus, but our projections are between 30 and 100 years out, depending on the project. So we incorporate everything we know into the water and sewer rates. We kind of put in there where we think the money's going to come from. That's available on the website if council wants to review it. We do that every 5 years. But the tax-based budget is really not including the water and the sewer portion. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Dan. Is there any questions on what I've presented so far? I'm happy to try to answer them.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike. Members of council, have you got anything that you'd like to jump in with? Again, I do not see you all, so just speak up.
It's only about 80 million, so it's not a big deal.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that.
No, okay.
Okay.
Thank
All
you,
right.
council.
Thank you very much, Mike. I'm sure we'll be coming back to talk to you. Let's go to Dan. Hello, Dan.
Hello, Your Worship, members of council.
Good.
Thank you, Director Ron, for that first part. As Mr. Ron said, I will be presenting the roads, transportation, bridges portion of the Public Works Department budget. So if you go to the next slide. I'm just going to first highlight some of the major increases in operations. In 2022, the increase to the gravel resurfacing budget is about $90,000. That increase takes into account actual value that we anticipate for 2022, including an already known 10% increase from our contractor that basically told us that this year we can expect a 10% increase across the board. So we're including that in our gravel resurfacing budget. Next slide. A couple of other increases we are presenting to council today is a increase to our line painting budget. The increase is about $32,000 to make an even $100,000 in our line painting. I believe that the line painting that was done in 2021 was a success that I've heard not only from council but from residents that that was a welcome change to our rural roads. Planning to expand this program to include additional roads, possibly some edging lines, and also a process in which we call inlay line painting for the intersection of County Road 26, County Road 42, and 91, which would entail shaving off a little bit of the pavement, and the actual line painting, the paint would actually embed itself down into the little grooves that are cut into the asphalt. This should allow for those lines that are at that major intersection to last for more than just a few months, for possibly up to 3 years. So that's another addition to that line painting budget. Another major increase to our sign budget is $50,000, and that was based on our October 5th workshop to council about speed reductions on those concession 10, Fairgrounds Road, and concession 6. Next slide, sorry. So this is just to follow up on Mr. Ron's presentation, and there's a bit more detail on the roads projects of those major capital projects. So he had mentioned a few times about the urbanization of Mowat Street. So that is proposed for 2022 by the developer from the north edge of Nottawasaga Station to the intersection of Highway 26. This would also include realignment of Mowat Street and Superior Street with Highway 26 as well. Mr. Ron has, over the past year, has been busy acquiring land on the south side, and both sides, north and south side of 26, to facilitate this realignment. The MTO is currently in review with the developer's engineer and RJ Burnside to review that, to come to an agreement for the realignment. Next slide. Again, continuation of the capital projects that we have submitted for 2022 would be the urbanization portion. So the roads, sanitary, sewer, curb and gutter, and sidewalk on that would be coming from the I'll call it the roads portion of the Public Works Department's budget for this project. So that would be from Phillip Street all the way to Centerline Road. And that design is well underway as well. Next slide. Also for 2022, we anticipate that portion of the work that needs to be done for Margaret Street, again, spearheaded by the developer, but as part of their approvals, Ashland Meadows Phase 1A and Phase 1B. Phase 1B in more particular would be they're required to urbanize Margaret Street from County Road 42 to the east end of their development. There are other works that proposed as indicated with the blue and green lines that Todd will speak to in his part of his presentation. But the urbanization works would also include curb and gutter, storm sewer, and sidewalk. Next slide. We're also proposing to continue on the concession 10 reconstruction. Phase 1 is nearing completion. They are anticipating to have it complete. It was supposed to be complete, to be honest with you, this week. I don't know if they'll get there. They've run into some weather, especially up in the hill. So that is, at some point this year they'll be finished, and that road will be open for the remainder of the season, and then closed again at some point next year for the remaining construction from 30-31 to where they've left off this year. Next slide. Mr. Ron also spoke of Locke Avenue. We have worked quite diligently this past year on the design for Locke Avenue to urbanize it. There will be some sanitary sewer that's required, and Todd will speak to that. But as part of the urbanization, we're looking to add a sidewalk on the south side of Locke Avenue from Highway 26 down to Jonathan Court, with a with the school crossing moving from where it is now down to the intersection, with a proper landing spot on the north side of Locke, which would require to eliminate a few parking spots on that north side, but it will give the students a good landing spot and proper crossing guard further away from the highway. Again, curb and gutter, new asphalt, sidewalk, and Todd will speak to the servicing of that. Next slide. Another thing that we've been working on, or I have been working on for the last year and a half, I guess, or so, is our street scan. So all of our roads have been scanned by a van, I guess, digitally. It takes a video or picture of all our roads, the deficiencies of those roads, and has compiled them into pavement condition indexing. This work has been done in the past for many, many years by qualified professionals. They drive every road and visually inspect the road. This is done by, data-based algorithms and just, a higher degree of certainty on, and they're all looked at the same. So, there's no favoritism between one road or another. So the way we currently stand for the municipality is that we have average pavement condition index of about 71, which is good. You know, our target is 70, but it does indicate that, you know, based on the numbers that we've put in here, that we are falling behind on our road resurfacing or road reconstruction projects to the tune of about $30 million. That's for hard surface roads only. This does not include our gravel surfaces in this assessment. So that is, you know, this takes time to compile, gets actual cost built into the document, into the spreadsheets, and we can take this information and you know, it's pretty plain when you see a red line. That red section is a very poor section based on its inspection, and that those would be you know, the need to be done first off, and then you could work your way up. But that number is pretty relevant when I say $30 million, and we're talking about in our roads budget that, you know, not only the taxpayers put money into road replacement or road resurfacing, but there's other things like gas tax funding, all our development projects that we're working on. There's other OCIF funding as well. So it's not all on the taxpayers, but there is a good portion there of money that needs to be found in the future. Next slide. As Mr. Ron had said, that, you know, we did take a really honest and sincere look at the budget, knowing that the pressures that are on council. So these are some projects that we have been working on for the last year or so that we are deferring for future budget years. You know, I didn't have on the slide here, but Centerline Road was a main focus. It's our busiest road in the municipality. It is deteriorating, but we've just finished. It just got paved on Thursday, I believe. That portion of Centerline Road south of County Road 9 for 1 kilometer. It was finished, and it should be open sometime this week. But we are in the midst of design work for Centerline Road for the north portion from County Road 9 north. Riverside Drive, you know, we've spoken about before. There's some road that's slipping away there. Other road resurfacing works, you know, we're not proposing to resurface any other roads in the municipality. Our focus for our budget money is going to be on those development projects that are listed. A few other little things that I've heard through the year or so that have come forward is a parking lot of some sort for downtown Creemore. We've been approached by the Village Green to replace some paver stones between what they're doing and the curb line. So we've obtained a quote for that work. New drainage study that has come to the forefront. We met in the spring or summer. That work is underway. RJ Burnside has done some preliminary work, and we've had a preliminary discussion with the NVCA on solving that issue. That work is going to be deferred for another year or so. And Creemore drainage and urbanization. So Mary Street, as part of the East Creemore drainage study, the Creemore drainage study, there is to be a major major storm sewer on Mary Street that will need to be installed with these developments, as these developments come aboard, and connecting those urbanization areas on Mary Street. Council may have noticed that Mary Street was urbanized across the Alliance portion, Alliance development portion this year. So we, in the future, we are going to be proposing to connect those areas with other urbanized areas of Mary Street. But those, like I said, those are some of the things that we know, some of the things we have been working on in the last little while that are just going to be deferred unless council directs us otherwise. And the next slide. Another capital project is our bridges, bridges and structures. So this is the project that is being proposed for 2022. It's not a full replacement, but it's a bolt hole. It's a multi-plate culvert down on the Blue Mountain Town Line. They're recommending, RG Burnside has done their inspections as they do every year. And this has come to the forefront with a bolt hole repair and a shotcrete repair, just to gain probably about 20 to 30 years of life from that before it needs to be fully replaced. A couple of other projects that are going to be are proposed to be in the design phase is the bridge at Brock Street, just I guess that's west of the park area. There's a big culvert there that has come to the forefront as well. We're proposing to do the design work this year only, survey and design, and also a continuation of the second concession bridge. So looking for solutions for that bridge. As council knows, that we closed this spring. So we're working with the NVCA on that as well to find out what can or cannot be done at that location. Next slide. Here's their proposal for our capital equipment, so large equipment needs for 2022. Working on this budget, I was not pleased to find out that our equipment reserve has taken a real hit. I think we can pinpoint it probably to a pretty major purchase that we had to purchase back in I think it was 2020. We were in desperate need of a replacement for grader, and that really drained the equipment reserve. But also on the other hand, that our equipment rates have not been kept up. The formula that we use in our operating really takes into account the MTO rates, we call them. So the Ministry of Transportation has set out rates that account for repair, fuel costs, and capital replacement, and those rates have not been kept up for several years. So this is another area of major increase in this. We'll go to operating that will take a hit for the tax base. So we're proposing to increase this for this year, which by $100,000, that gets us to $290,000 from our operating will get transferred into equipment reserve. It's still nowhere near what we need to, equipment purchase costs for 2 plow trucks. We're looking at least $600,000. That's what we're proposing in 2022. That's $300,000 each. Delay time and manufacturing time now, prices, we don't even know if that $300,000 will do it. But I just gave a summary here. Todd's worked really hard on proposing a large capital equipment replacement schedule. I think he did it for about 25 years, I think, but these are for the next 5 years. So you can see where this is going to need some work, and I'll work with finance to see on ways that we can do this better in the future. Next slide. So that is the end of my portion of this. If council has any questions or comments, I think we're open to taking those now for that portion of the budget.
Thank you, Dan. Members of council, any questions or comments to Mr. Perot? I see McKechnie. And again, since I can't see everybody, As soon as Doug's finished, if anybody else wants to jump in, just speak up.
Thanks, Dan. Just two comments here. That first slide that you had, the gravel resurfacing, and it's got the map on there, and there's different colors there on that map. Just wondering what the colors mean. And secondly, the map doesn't really go too far west. Just wondering if there's any possibility, just for my own interest's sake, maybe getting a copy of that map, just emailed to me, just for my own interest's sake. But if you could comment on the colors. And secondly, the comment that I had regarding Riverside Drive. Yeah, I know it's not in great shape, but as the councillor for Ward 2, I've only had one person express any sort of concern about that and about Riverside Drive. And I told them that it would be done, next year or the year after, sometime down the road. I told them that that's high up in the priority list, but there's only been one person that's complained to me about that. So, but anyway, that map for gravel resurfacing, what about those colors? What do they mean?
Perhaps, Fawn, you could slide back to that map. Could you wait at the beginning there? Go forward. There you go. Dan?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and Councillor McKechnie. I'm not going to take any credit for this. This is all Todd's doing. So, if Todd, Todd worked with Janet, our GIS specialist, and created this map, and his team put together. Council recalls that I think it was my first year here, or first budget year, that we were all worked together to put a 5-year program together of road resurfacing, gravel resurfacing, and to keep it consistent year over year. So this is the plan that we've put together. And yes, sorry, the west portion of the municipality is missing. I just took a snippet of what we are proposing this year. And sorry, yes, I should have mentioned that the green roads, the green areas, those sections are the roads that are on the schedule to be resurfaced in 2022.
Okay.
So that those colors represent years, or so year 1 was one color, year 2, year 3, year 4, and year 5. So I think this is year 3. Todd probably knows better, but again, that's what they represent, and certainly we can get you a full color, full list or full map of the municipality if you'd like.
Yeah, just for interest's sake, and if it's not, just email it to me. And if it's not easily emailed, don't worry about it. It's not that important. I was just out of interest's sake, that was all. So anyway, so those colors then are just for the years. Okay, that's fine. I thought maybe someone had their kid do it or whatever, and use different markers and such. So yeah, okay, that's good. Thank you.
And sorry, just to answer Riverside Drive. Yeah, I think if Fawn could go to that street scan, we're basing these decisions on, on our data-based or data-driven decision making, and Riverside Drive down there shows up as very poor. So,
yeah.
That's one, and there are a couple of locations there at the bends that have been issues for a number of years, and it may just be that we need to extend the life of this, is just to repair a few sections of that road to extend its life for maybe for a few more years. But it is a project that we had been working on. That's what I wanted to point out to council.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Hang on a second, Phyllis. Phyllis, I see you there. 1 second. Dan, on this very slide, at the bottom of your it says here pavement evaluations. The last portion of that gets cut off. It does say the word serious, however. So do we have any pavements in this community that are fall underneath the serious category?
Your Worship, yeah, this is just a screenshot, so I apologize that it didn't capture the whole thing there. But if you'd like, I could go to the actual program, and I would have to check that.
Anyway, I decided to ask.
Get back to council. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, when in your presentation, you spoke about how street scan is something we've invested in, and it's now starting to show some data that's can be useful certainly for your staff as well as for council to understand where we have some deficiencies that are, you know, not disputable, because it's very clearly showing up in the evidence. So street scan is a valuable tool. So.
And there's actually two more, your worship. There's a serious and then there's a failed. So there's
even better.
There's another one that below that. So if I can get that information. I don't believe that there is any failed ones, but I'd have to check on the serious ones.
Well, just as a comment, then perhaps you can set up either some one-on-one time or mini workshops with a couple of council members to give us a sort of an overview of how this investment in street scan is working. You know, to be kind of interesting to sit at a computer and look at this and see this information for councilors to understand. And as a result, we do have quite a vast variety of road surfaces across our whole township, right? I mean, we have all types of surfaces that we have to deal with. So it's I think it's a good tool that we have. That's something we can do, Dan, is do one-on-one sort of sit down and look at this.
Yeah, absolutely, your worship. And I had even, I'd even thought at some point in time, maybe after our budget process has been completed here, is to because I'm still learning this program as well,
sure.
is to perhaps have somebody from Street Logics come in and do an overview or presentation of what they've found so far, and the different tools that are available for municipalities, because there are budgeting budget estimators, I guess, to see how much money you're putting into a budget, where your roads are going to go. So there are lots of different little tips and tools that are available on it that I'm not fully up to speed, to be honest with you, on yet, but they have offered to be available to present to council perhaps earlier on in the new year.
For sure. If I can just speak on that really briefly, and that is that I attended an Ontario Good Roads Association meeting some time ago and in person, so that's how long ago it was, but there was a really good presentation about all the tools that are available in this street scan, Street Logics operation. So there's a lot of information here yet to be garnered by members of the council and members of your staff. So anyway, I'm really glad we have it. Okay, can I go to Phyllis? Councillor Deneen, you want to jump in?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just basically wanted to ask that as well, just prior, if we could, before we go to the Good Roads again in January, if indeed that does happen. I was just wondering if we could have a little overview about street scan and know exactly what we're talking about with our own roads. And if, Dan, if there's anything that you were, like the report or the picture that you were going to share with Councillor McKechnie, if we could all have a copy of that, it would be great. I'd greatly appreciate it. Thanks.
Yep, Your Worship, to Councillor Deneen, yes, for sure. I can get that facilitated. Probably need Janet's expertise to do that, and you'll see probably on the legend it'll show 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003. So don't pay too much attention to that. Those are just the years that we started it, and so once we get to the end of the program, it's going to start again. So those roads will be flipped up, and it doesn't mean that we're sticking to all of these roads too. We've had to go into other areas to put more gravel on certain roads that perhaps deteriorated faster or problem areas or hadn't been done for many, many years. So this isn't for sure, but this is our plan anyway.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I agree. If we could get a nice colored print available to all members of council, and you can ask through Jen Kane Percy, you can get it dropped into the mailboxes here for all of our staff, and just send them an email, Dan, to tell them it's here. Okay?
Sure, we'll do that.
Thank you. All right. Now, is there any other questions of part of Dan's presentation so far? Anybody else get any questions or comments?
Yeah, Deputy Mayor here.
Go ahead.
Worship. Dan, when you were doing your presentation, I was watching it and I had to step away for a short second, and I don't think I missed it. In the bridge capital expenses, capital project, you didn't mention the Collingwood Street Bridge. What is scheduled for that for 2022?
Good question. Dan?
Thank you, Your Worship, and to Deputy Mayor. So I believe the way it's left off that staff is going to report back to council in the new year with more detailed information on two options, whether to replace it or to close and create the alternate route, I guess I'll call it. So that work is taking place as we speak. Burnside is working on that. So once we have that back from RG Burnside, we will we'll be presenting that. For the most part, the work that's required to do this is not well. Sorry, council already contributes funds to transfer to a bridge reserve. So it'd be anticipated that we could possibly take that money if whatever council decides, we can take that and out of the bridge reserve that council already contributes to. I think it's about $788,000 a year.
So safe to say then that anything being done to that bridge would not come out of taxation, that would come out of the reserve. And I realize taxation is putting money into the reserve, but it wouldn't affect the tax levy.
That's correct. Yeah. So this project here, I think is about $300 and some odd thousand. We have a bit of money, as I said, for some engineering work on a couple other bridges. If council, we would approach with cost estimates to do just the engineering portion of whichever council decides that would be taking place. And then, a future budget year, we'd present the capital amount that would be required. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Kelly, but I believe there's about almost $3 million in there right now in the capital bridge reserve. You can confirm with there. Yeah.
That is correct. And we are transferring $788,000 per year into that reserve.
So one final up, if I may, Mayor. So safe to say that nothing's going to happen until the Collingwood Street Bridge this year, as far as closing it or rerouting it. It would not be on the books for this year. Is that correct?
Oh, yes. Through your worship to the deputy mayor. Like I said, where staff is proposing, as council's instructed, to come back with some more detailed cost estimates on either option. And then depending on what's decided there, we would begin the engineering works for that. And that may take a year or more, because we would have to apply for permits from the NVCA and the NEC, Niagara Escarpment Commission, would also need to obtain a permit from them to do those works, either works. So yes, it would be a year or more, maybe two, before any work is completed there.
Okay, I'd like to just comment there, Deputy Mayor. It would be my hope that within 12 months that this council makes a decision to clarify the direction about the disposition of the Collingwood Street culvert / bridge project. It was something that we talked about more than a year ago that we need to decide. And so we put the word out to our staff that we were looking for options and looking for investigation. And subsequent to that, the meeting that we had there, that we had quite a discussion about the Collingwood Street Bridge, this project, and we've now asked for more information. So it would be my hope that council will at least decide what direction we're going. And that's when funding will need to be applied, whether it comes all from reserve or whether additional taxation needs to be applied to complete the project, within the budget. So you're right. I don't believe it's going to be part of the 2022 budget at this point, but I would suggest that ongoing works are going to continue to bring us to the point where work council will be able to make a decision. Hopefully that helps. Is there anybody else with any other question? Thank you, Deputy Mayor, by the way. Tom, I see you there. Hello. Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you. Just a couple quick questions for now to Dan. The Riverside Drive, I think you've answered most of my questions, except the when you said you want to extend the life until the main job would be done. I'm assuming you're talking like something from 15, 16 to 9. There's some significant portion. But the portion that's in the middle, it's on the top of the hill and on the Mad River side, you know what I'm talking about. It actually, it's quite noticeable this year that it's starting to fall away again. So are we covering the cost of the maintenance? This is about the second or third year we've done something significant, but not quite, haven't stabilized the bank enough to know that the roadbed is going to be stable. So how much are we going to spend on the road this year, do you think? Do you have an estimate?
Dan?
Your Worship, to Councillor Patterson. You know, I would say in the, you know, for the work just to patch it. So, you know, most likely what we would have to do at those two locations is to excavate what's there out, replace some with some additional gravel, you know, and repave it. So we're, you know, that could most likely be absorbed again, unless it gets into something that's really big, but it could be absorbed by our operating budget. You know, we could absorb about a, you know, $5,000 to $7,000 project probably.
Oh,
you know,
okay.
I can't anticipate it being much more than that.
So we're not going to buttress, try to do any buttressing of the slope this time, or to make it live longer or anything like that. It's only going to be a surface treatment, minimal surface treatment.
Yeah. At this point, that's about all we could really do with that. You know, the ultimate solution, or a solution, I guess, that we're trying to achieve would be, you know, full width, you know, pretty good depth drainage improvements there from the east side to the north, to the west.
Yeah, I've always assumed because of the curves, and some of the curves are up on the hill and against the riverbank, at least the slope to the river, that we might even have to require property to realign.
Yeah.
Is that anticipated in the 1.6?
To your worship, to Councillor Patterson, not as part of the design that I've seen. Okay. So Burnside has done some designing already on that. The majority of the work really is going to be pretty major drainage improvements.
Yeah.
I think what's happening there is that the east side, the hill on the east side, there's lots of springs and water that comes from that east side that tries to get across there. And I know, you know, 20 plus years ago, some pretty major work had been done there, according to Don McNulty and Steve Sage, that there was pretty major drainage works there. And those drainage works may be, you know, filled in, you know, infiltrated. There's a whole bunch of speculation. We won't know until we open it up. But that was, I'll say that's part of the 1.5 I think I had in there. But for this year, you know, we will have to just kind of get by with some patching. You know, maybe a bit more than just putting asphalt on top of it. Is maybe digging it out, relaying some gravel in there to buy us another year or so.
Just some quick ones. When the tree study, you have it down as 2021 tree study removed, and you show 25,000 out. Is that the contribution to reserves in 2022? Not sure what that means. We put 50 away last year, at least for this year. 21.
Dan, if I can jump in there.
Yeah, I think we've had that discussion with Kelly, so Kelly may be able to provide information on that.
Through your worship, to Councillor Patterson, that's the removal of the study based on the assumption that the study was done in 2021. The 50,000 transfer to the reserve for the tree canopy is still there in the public works budget. So at the end of 2022, there would be basically 75,000, sorry. Does that make sense?
Sorry, so what's the reserve amount at the end of 2022?
It would be 75,000. So it would have been 50,000 transfer for 2021 and 2022, less the 25,000 for the actual study.
Right, so 50,000 every year, we spent 25, so we have 75,000 in reserve.
Correct.
Okay, all right, so that clarifies that, thank you. If I may just go through.
Sure, go ahead, Tom. Go ahead.
Rapid questions. The street scan, I love this software because it's database. It's very, and in context to the framework, it's where you're going, Dan, and in all your major construction works, we're not flying by the seat of our pants anymore. We're not that I'm saying that the visual wasn't good and experience rated, but now we have a much better consistency across our decision making if we use the data.
Sorry, if I can just add, so that we have this done, my thinking is that we need to, as a whole, start thinking about what it's going to cost, to water and sewer. The rates are built in, so they know they put in a water main at today, and it's going to need to be replaced in 100 years, and they factor that amount in into the sewer rates, and that's really hasn't been done. It's not any fault of anybody's, but it's really not done in the roads industry. I guess it should be done as part of our asset management, but certainly going to be working on that in order to develop some sort of I'm not going to call it a rate system, but there's an amount that could be considered by council for capital road resurfacing replacement over the years, so that we're not coming to council every year asking for $5 million to do some of this work. So that's the thinking of this program as well, and that will be able to tell us.
So you're on the same wavelength I am. So the 2 points to it. In near term, are all the decisions, doesn't have to be, I'm just asking how useful the program is right now, the data. Are all the programs you're talking about, like sidewalks, for example, are they generated from the street scan? Or is there still some as balance between what we kind of know being out in the field versus the data that we're getting from street? Is it a transition that we're into when we're going to be fully sort of street scan driven, or essentially mostly? So in other words, are the decisions we're making right now for 2022, are they street scan driven?
Through your worship to Councillor Patterson, well, 2022, really is focused on our development obligations. So there are some of the projects that the developers, or that we need to do to facilitate the developments. There are some, so Margaret Street's on there. Can't zoom in there close enough, but Margaret Street is definitely on there. You can see Riverside Drive, it's in red, right? So it's very poor. So there are some of those things. I'd say, to your point, it's probably more of a transition right now, because we are using some of this data in 2021 sidewalk replacement. I definitely used the sidewalk portion of that assessment as my guide for replacing those sidewalks. And
I thought so.
And just to point out, like, this doesn't, it's not, I guess it's not intelligent enough, I guess I'll say. So, they'll show a portion of Red Road, and I think it happens on Warrington Road, let's say. So there's a portion of Warrington Road that's maybe about, 200 meters long that's in very poor condition. Well, in reality, would we really just do 200 meters? Probably not. We'd maybe do a larger section, kilometer kind of makes sense, and we constructing things. So in some instances, we may need to use some judgment and use our own information and what we know and what we don't know. But concession 10, you can see is on that section. It's red, so, but we haven't got to there yet. We're not haven't, other than the portion that we're doing, that south portion to 124 is probably going to be coming up in the next few years.
Okay, thanks. And the last point I wanted to make on that is I think we're talking about the same thing when you talked about asset management and that. But this is what some the municipalities typically don't do as well as they should, and that's life cycle costing. So we start putting money away based on the fact that we just built an asset worth so much money, and we know that it's got a useful life of 20, 30, or 40 years, whatever it is. So that's where you're heading to as well. Is that what I heard?
That is my hope. Yes.
Yeah. Good.
Again, water and sewer, they do it well. I think, because they had to do it, but that's certainly a model that it should be represented in the roads and sidewalk program as well.
Okay. And I think, okay, I had a question on, you had the capital road projects deferred to future years, and that's, when you say future years, 23 and beyond.
That's correct, yeah.
You're not ready to say where yet, but
yeah.
And then I thought we would be doing more work on the east. This is my last point. I thought we'd be doing more preparatory work this year on the East Creemore drainage study in anticipation of its need probably in 2023 or at the latest 2024.
Yeah, Councillor Patterson, as part of what Mike had mentioned on the master servicing plans, that because the EA for the East Creemore drainage study is over 10 years old, that will be picked up again. It needs to be refreshed or renewed. And it's not quite as long a process, but that will be happening in 2022 as well.
Will that in any way restrict the amount of development that some developers have a hope to achieve over the next couple of years in Creemore? Alliance, Bricks, the one on the east on Edward Street.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Mike's probably a bit more familiar with on the processes, but the East Creemore drain is in the development charges background study. So the work that's required for that, especially the east part of the Creemore drainage study, will need to be facilitated, constructed by the developers. So the Mary Street portion, there's a big sewer that comes down Mary Street. That would be, it's not necessarily required for the development. The east portion is more so. We would have to construct the sewer on Mary Street as part of what I'll call urbanization.
Yeah.
And I believe that's only from, I think that's from Elizabeth Street, I think, south.
All right, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Tom, for those extended. Oh, sorry, Mike Ron, you want to jump in? Please do.
Yeah, I just, Councilor Patterson, through your worship, the list I left there for Creemore, it's council has discretionary spending on what we do in all these developments. So like in Stainer, we've really pushed to have the developers fund the studies and infrastructure that they require to grow. We're quite willing to assist with that. So going back now, the East Creemore drain, the Nottawa EA for water and sewer, like those studies, they don't quite expire, but after 10 years, you have to amend them. And there's a lot of money to spend to amend them. My recommendation is that the developers are willing to go forward if they want to finance these studies, right? Well, I left that to be determined. If council would like to fund those studies, we will move forward as past practice, we've always asked the developers to fund these things because these studies sit so long. We don't want them sitting there and spending money for nothing. So in Creemore, I would recommend we ask the development community to fund the master plan, and the drainage study may not fall under the master plan. If it's a simple amendment, that study may be able to be amended, fairly cost effectively in order to facilitate a future construction project. But it's when we get to that point for construction. So before any more development can occur in Creemore, we need to know where the well is going to be. So right now it's on a map on the Alliance property. It's beside a county road and a hydro transformer facility. So a county road with 50 years of heavy salt application, I can almost guarantee the sodium content would be too high in a municipal well at that location. So we're not going to, we don't want to hinder the developers. If we allow them to put another phase in the subdivision and that's the only place a municipal well could go, well, they've kind of shot themselves in the foot, right? They've added a temporary stormwater pond with no liner. That's going to limit where the well can go. The old landfill limits where a well can go. So we've told the developers in Creemore for 15 years, start the well study. So before the well study started, all of the other things that they want to do are kind of back burner, in my opinion. If that helps.
Yeah, it does. It does, Mike. That's where I'm heading, is that developers are going to have to look at some funding. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tom. I acknowledge Councillor Lamers. I think you've got your question up. You'd like to say something?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. To Dan, your Stainer sand dome, you putting a complete tarp over that, or you just doing those 2 sections? And the building in New Lowell, your works building in New Lowell, what's happening there?
Excellent questions. Both those are on my list too. So between Dan and Todd, why don't you give us an update first on Stainer, on the Stainer sand structure? And I acknowledge the Deputy Mayor Barry. I'll get to you. Go ahead, Dan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Lamers. So we'll start with Stainer. So in the development charges background study, there is anticipated growth for Stainer. So there is an expansion to not only the I'll call the works garage, but also to the sand structure. So there's 2 items in that development charges background study. Because we are going through what we are going through right now with the sand coverall, it is deteriorating. As you know, we've just recently had 3 sections of it removed. I guess 3 sections of tarp. So we are proposing to replace the entire structure because it is rusting. Full replacement of that, I think, was in approximately $400,000. We are proposing to use development money to replace the entire structure with a sand. It's known as a sand shed. You'll probably know the term, Councillor Lamers. Sand shed with garage bays. So we're kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone as far as an expansion to the shed, the garage area, with a sand structure. That is a bit of industry standard now. You don't see too many coverall buildings anymore. You don't see the old MTO sand domes too more either. So we're proposing to do that. Like I said, kind of it completes two needs that we have: more garage space and sand storage area. As for the New Lowell building, this is a project that I believe was in the budget last year as well, but it's a joint facility between Public Works and Fire Department. So it's I guess taking down both structures, the New Lowell Works Yard garage and the Fire Department facility and combining it into one facility with a common area in between. Public Works would be on one side, fire department would be on the other. So those design works have already been undertaken. So those are the two building structures projects. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to hear that you're putting up the wood, or not a sand dome. What do you use there for the sand shed? Yeah, that'll be a lot nicer, and it'll give you more garage space too. And what's happening with the new old one? Is that design build, or?
Yeah, I agree. Where are we at, Dan, when it comes to the new Lowell project? And to be honest, when the fire chief was on board the last meeting, I was going to ask him that question too. But anyway, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Yeah, just last week we had a, I guess I saw our first look at it. It's pretty. They're pretty foolproof, I'll call it. The common area has some offices and some washrooms and things like that. And then there are two double bay garages on either side. So 4 bays on one and 4 bays on the other. So we've had our first look at the design for that, but they will be, yes, there'll be design build projects. There'll be some site works that need to be done as well. The initial thought is to have the building constructed as far to the west as possible, not into the parks area, but over to that side. So we'd have the communications tower where it's located now would essentially be at the northeast corner of the new building, if that gives you a visual on approximately where this is proposed to be.
Okay. I can just supplement to Mr. Lamer's question. Would that then give access to the existing sand dome that's in the back there that is going to just stay right where it is? We're not proposing to change it at this time.
That is correct, Your Worship. No changes to that yet. No.
Okay. Great.
But there's still be plenty of room there to access the sand dome.
Okay.
And when are we planning on going ahead with this, in 22 or 23?
2022 is when we propose. We're hoping that we can get a tender out here, in the springtime, pretty early in the spring. Take advantage of the bidding process. It's always better to get it off in the spring. So, we had our initial meeting. There wasn't many changes that were required from our standpoint. They have to do a bit of site work, engineering, but we can get that out to tender. We're fairly confident that we can get it out in the springtime on both accord. We met also about the sand structure in Stainer as well. Again, they're pretty commonplace. We can design build to get that out for spring of 2022 as well, if council approves the budget, of course.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lamers. Good questions. I'm glad you brought that up about the new Lowell building. And again, another example of where our departments are working together. So thank you for that. Deputy Mayor Burton, you had a card up and you had a question. Go ahead.
Yes, Dan, of your overall increase, can you give me an idea of the dollar value, how much it is actually related to COVID? Rather than, like, I understand you're putting in increase to do extra work, but how much of the increase is actually directly related to COVID, like the increased cost for, for asphalt, increased cost for gravel, for day-to-day operations and stuff like that? Can you give me any kind of an idea?
Good question. Dan, have you got any thought on that?
Through your worship, that's a hard question to answer. We've got a letter, related to COVID, is the construction price index related to COVID. Possibly, it has a good portion. So I think we've seen construction indexing over the years at, probably between 4 and 5%, perhaps. Now it's up close to, I think, 12% now. It was 11. So, are those directly related to, is all that directly related to COVID and on supply chain issues and things like that? You could possibly say that. Like I said in my gravel section, we've already received the letter from our existing gravel supplier for 2021 that we can expect a 10% increase to that. So, on a $400,000 item, that's $40,000 right there. So I think it's hard to kind of nail down what's COVID related. Is it all supply chain issue related to COVID? Perhaps, most likely. So I'd say between 5-6%.
Barry?
Yeah, okay, thanks. Yeah, okay, I'll have to work out the numbers to see if that works out too. I'm thinking in adding up numbers in my head. I think overall we're probably looking at 100 grand anyways of your budget increases directly related to COVID.
Yeah, with our roads related capital projects, and Kelly's going to probably speak better to this than I can, but capital roads related capital works, it was just over in 2021, it was just over $1 million. I think what she said was $1,065,000 of taxation money went to roads capital works. So for 10% of that, I think that you're probably pretty close. 10% of that, I think we're 1.18. Kelly knows the numbers more than I do, better than I do. But
like the deputy mayor said, about $100,000 anyway. Sure. Okay. Thank you for that. Is there anybody else have any questions or comments to Dan on the sections that he has presented at this point? Just up and down on my members of council. I'm just looking. I don't see anything further. I'll take my stab at it here then. Dan, you spoke about concession 10. It's going to be, you hope, this week. We're hoping that things are going to kind of wrap up there for phase 1. Will there be construction signs remain through the season? That it's a work in progress? Like we're not just, reopening the road to, it is still a construction road, is that right? I mean, what I'm saying is just because of the season and the phases of the work, it's still a construction site, is that correct?
Your worship, if the road opens, it's going to be a proper road.
Okay.
If I can put it frankly, so there will be the proper road signage. Council just passed the last meeting, the bylaw to reduce the speed. So the speed reduction signs, the 60K from 30/31 to 91 will be in place. Proper guardrail will be in place before that road opens. So my answer to that would be, unless there is something that they cannot get done between now and when they open it, it will be opened as, I'll call it a fully open road until the springtime.
Okay. It will not be paved though. Is that correct?
It will not be paved. It'll be a gravel road. That's correct.
So would we be prudent to put up some signs that say slow, rough roads ahead or something like that? Because this is a ongoing construction project. It's just being halted for the winter season. Would we be at any advantage to do something like that to indicate that the road could be rough, which would help us support people being a little slower?
Yeah, we certainly look at it. It would all have to depend on the condition of the road. you know, if we do decide to open, or when we decide to open it, what the condition of that road is. And we'll obviously monitor it with our routine patrolling throughout the winter but if it does start, to your point, start to get rough, or, you know, if something settles, and then certainly, we'll have to do something like that. And perhaps we'll leave up the signage that we have as far as the construction signage that we have up there.
Right.
Not actually road closed signs, but like, this road's under construction from, you know, here to there type thing.
Okay, I'm just thinking that, you know, it's sort of we're partway through this project, and I would just really hate to think that we have yet again more coach buses get themselves sliding out of control or getting themselves stuck. And so reducing the speed and et cetera that we've already done, and we're almost there. I would really hope that we'll have a good winter season. So I'm just hoping that we're going to be able to do that. So I'll leave it with you and your great expertise on that. Can I ask you another question? The Locke Avenue project, and as you mentioned, it has been discussed a couple times here at council. This will include the extensions of the portions of sidewalk that'll then connect up to Jonathan Street. Is that part of this project that you're proposing now?
Yep. If Fawn, if you can put back that slide. I think
Yeah,
it's the
Fawn,
next
where
one.
is that? That's right. Sorry.
That's right. Yeah, it's the next. Right.
There.
Oh. No, it was right behind the other one. Keep going. But 3 slides. Next one. Right there.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah, so right here where we're looking that's Jonathan to the south. Jonathan Court is to the south there. So the sidewalk, sidewalk would be extended, well, essentially on both sides. You know, they'll have sidewalk on both sides of Locke from 26 to the school. The sidewalk would be extended to where we brought the sidewalk up from Elm and Jonathan. That's where it meets. So then the students would walk along the south side of Locke Avenue up to this point, and then cross here to get to the school on the north.
Correct. So this is we're going to be moving the crosswalk when this is all done. It'll now be located in the property that's right between Stainer Collegiate and Clearview Meadows School. Is that right? That's where the crosswalk is going to be moved to.
This is right at Clearview Meadows. Like
Correct.
Right at the front door. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so that's perfect. Okay, I'm happy to see that happening. By the way, good stuff. The last thing I want to mention, you made a really good point about our equipment reserves, and I guess that's specifically for our, let's call it the heavy equipment reserves. I know that we've had significant savings as a result of our work that we've done with the enterprise rental and leasing operation. You're showing approximately $73,000 in savings as a result of the small truck fleet, and yet you're talking about the equipment reserve being in a deficit of about 100,000. So I guess this is pretty close. It's not exact numbers, but it's pretty close that we're saving some money on our small vehicles, but we're definitely going to need to catch up on our equipment reserves. Is that how you interpret it as well?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Yeah, I believe the 73,000 was savings to our maintenance.
Okay.
There's also contribution from a portion of the operating that goes into those what would have been capital replacements of those small duty vehicles, light duty vehicles.
Light duty. That's a better word. Sorry about that. Hey, they're serious trucks. I get it. They're just light duty.
So there's savings, kind of savings on both ends, but you know what we can really tell is the savings on our maintenance, because all these trucks, it will cost us no maintenance. It's built into the program that we're working with Enterprise on. So yes, it's in the past it's been an overall reserve, I'll call it. So we didn't have 2 reserves. It was just an equipment reserve. So if we needed to buy a pickup truck, it would have come from that reserve, this one that's in deficit. So, and it really, the only thing that I found as I dug deeper and deeper and deeper is that the rates that were in the operating just had not been being kept up enough over the years that and set out by the MTO. So
Okay.
we're approximately, from what I looked at, we're probably about 3 times lower than what we should be in our equipment rates.
Okay. Well, let's keep that in mind then for this budget and future budgets, that we have to take a closer look at that as the cost of the heavier equipment continues to rise. Okay. All right. Those are the basic questions that I have for your presentation thus far. I would like to add one thing, and that is that the early slide showed where all the different developers were that Mike was talking about in Stayner area specific. And certainly Fawn, you're going to have to go way back. Back, okay, one forward. There you go. So I want you to just, Fawn, take your mouse and put it right on top of that North Street project, whatever at North Street. Okay, so certainly council has heard several times about the lack of a piece of sidewalk right there on that North Street road. And obviously it is our intention to work with developers to bring forward these type of sidewalk improvements or even creation when they develop their properties. And Dan, you answered council quite well in an email. Maybe you could just verbalize it for anybody who might be watching about, sidewalks are one of those projects that a developer does, but they don't do it in the first phase of their project. They generally do it in the closing phases of a project, right, Dan?
Yeah, your worship. Yeah, typically, sidewalks are one of the last things that get done after the development or whatever they're building gets built. They build the road, curb and sidewalk are kind of the last things they do before they put the final lift of asphalt on. That's typical of development process. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And again, on this particular one, we're not seeing any movement on this. We're calling it the North Street properties at this time. As I understand it, Mike Ron would be able to help me fill this in. I don't think that particular property owner is even participating in the water project that we're working on together. So I'm unsure as to whether and when that is ever going to happen. Mr. Ron, you got any thought?
Yeah, certainly, your worship. So that property has often come up with interest from different developers. If they had have gone forward 5 years ago, they could have just went ahead and built.
Yeah.
I think now with the economy, with the pressures of development in our area, we're expecting the water to come online by 2024. I think that development will probably get built in 2024. They have not participated in the pre-purchase water agreement as some of these other developers have. It's important to know, like, when this development goes forward, similar if you look to the east of that road's going to be dropped down. There's going to be curb and gutter. Like, we couldn't just go up there and put a sidewalk in for the sake of putting a sidewalk in. The drainage issues that go along with that are very expensive. There's sanitary sewers have to go in as well. That's all part that the sidewalk is part of the developer's requirements, as is every development.
Yeah.
We don't put it on the taxpayer, we put it on the developer. And they pay for that. That's just normal business. So it's going to be a few years. We can certainly look at an interim measure if we want to spend some money there. Personally, I've been up there. I know once in a while we receive some negative feedback about the street. On the pictures that I've seen on Facebook hasn't even had a person on the street. So
yeah.
Okay, so efficiently.
Well, I'm bringing it up to both of you because it is a concern that citizens continue to bring forward. The challenge here is that it continues to be our process to work with developers as they build out their projects. And this one is a bit of a troublesome beast because it's a connection. It's a piece that's missing in order for students that are trying to transit to both our elementary and secondary schools, as well as people even just wanting to maneuver along there. So I would ask that we continue to work with this developer and see how we can bring this to resolution. And as you said, perhaps Mike, perhaps it's something that we may have to invest in the future and bill it back to the developer, I guess. But to Dan's answer that he gave us in an email was that it's certainly difficult when it's generally one of the last things get done in a project is to do the curb and gutter because all the other work that goes on would virtually just destroy any work that would be done ahead of time. So yeah, it's certainly a difficult one. I know that you guys as professionals appreciate that the public bring forward their current concerns and comments about this one. And we have to try to work with that developer a little bit closer. Okay, that's really all I have at this point then. I guess we can move on to the last portion of your presentation, unless there's any other members of council with anything. Just to quickly look up and down here. You're all good. Oh, hello, Mr. Walker. Go ahead.
Yes, Your Worship. I was just going to make a quick comment about North Street.
Sure.
We talked about Mike talked about interim. Is there a possibility to do a bit of an asphalt connection across the boulevard there to connect for now until such time as the developer moves forward? Because that could be, I believe that property's been sold, has changed hands 2 or 3 times this last while. So I'm wondering if there's a possibility of an asphalt connection at this point to tie it in for the safety. There are a lot of children up in that area that do walk along that road to the school, to the connection of the existing sidewalk by the daycare and then to the crossing guard on 26.
Precisely what I was thinking about. Mike, have you got a comment?
We'll certainly look at that, Your Worship, and Councillor Walker. Probably Dan and Todd's expertise more than mine, but we could probably start with the trail and look at paving that trail. I don't know the geography in front of that place. I know what it's going to look like when it's finished, but I don't know what it would take to do that, what kind of vegetation or cost we'd be looking at there. So we'll certainly look at it and get back to you at next council meeting, next budget meeting, maybe.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
If I may, maybe to the CAO, Mr. CAO, perhaps you could reach out to this owner, see if you can set up a discussion between Mike, Dan, Todd, the owner, yourself, see if we can come to some type of resolution on that. All right. All right, members of council, I think we're ready to move on unless there's anybody else. Just again, looking, I don't see any other cards or hands. So who's got the next section? Is that back to you, Mike?
That would be your owner's representative for the drinking water and sewer systems, Mr. Todd Patton.
Mr. Patton, welcome. You've been
Thank
very
you, Your
quiet,
Worship, members of council.
and patient.
Happy to take it all in. No, thanks for your time today. I'm going to be presenting the water and sanitary, sewer, and storm part of the Public Works budget. As Mike mentioned earlier, I just want you to keep in mind the water and sanitary I'll do first, and that comes out of basic user fees. The storm, which will be a couple slides at the end, that is at a taxation. So we'll start with the water and sanitary, and specifically water. And as I said, after each section, if there's any questions or concerns, please feel free to ask away. We'll give a minute to discuss if you like.
Fire away, no problem.
You'll probably hear a lot of repetition as we discuss, because a lot of ours is focused on development as well. Some big numbers out there, but once again, it's all developer driven, and you'll see some slides that are similar, but I'll just touch quickly on what's going in for water and sanitary in those slides, and we can keep moving on. Okay, next slide, Fawn, please. So we'll start with the drinking water systems. Next slide. I'm just going to talk about a couple items of interest for the bigger items and capital items from within our water facilities. You see HMI and PLCs. Those are, what that means is it's a HMI is a human machine interface and a PLC is a programmable logic controller. So when we talked earlier in our action items or actions, we discussed about utilizing technology. So as most of you are all aware, some have been here for as council, we upgraded a lot of our water system 15, 20 years ago. HMIs and PLCs were in 10 to 14 years ago. What they allow us to do is they allow us to connect with our pump houses remotely. They allow the pump houses to run by themselves. It's pretty much the way you had to go. It's keeping up with the technology. The HMIs, what they've done the last 5 or 6 years, is they allow the user, the operator, when he goes there, to be able to see what's happening on site. You can look in one spot and see all the digital readings, check pressures, check residuals, check flows. So these pop up as a part of our life cycle costing program. So they're not something we're just throwing out there because we think we need to replace them. They show up based on a timeline we give them, just like any electronics, just like your TVs in your home. They only last so long. So with our life cycle costing program, we like to replace them before they fail to maintain the safety of the drinking water. So you'll see a few big items on there for New Lowell, Stainer, Collingwood Lands, the SCADA server replacement. That's our main SCADA server at the Public Works building, which I believe most of you has seen if you've done the tour. It's in one of the offices. That's where we can see everything from one spot. We can look at Buckingham Woods, we can look at Stainer, Creemore, and see what's happening. Next item, please, Fawn. So we'll jump into the development portions of these where you have the Sunnydale Street water main, similar to Dan's slide as already discussed. This is going to be, we're going to replace the existing 6-inch AC water main along Sunnydale Street with a 12-inch water main. Some spots along Sunnydale Street, there is 2 water mains from prior builds, which connected our well to the town of Stainer supply. At the time it was installed, we needed a 12-inch supply to supply contact to the town. That's no longer necessary. We have chambers on site. So while the works are going on, while the urbanization of the street is happening, we're getting rid of a 60 to 70-year-old AC water main, which is asbestos cement, and replacing with a 12-inch PVC. This will allow fire flow for Manortown homes to increase, as well as anybody else on Sunnydale Street. And we're taking it right to Centerline Road, so that will allow for any future development that might take place out further that way. Next slide, please, Fawn. Next, we get into the Margaret and Phillip Street water main. So once again, as Dan mentioned, a lot of this is being built along with the Ashton Meadows while they're putting the sanitary in. Other developments in the northeast end of town require fire flows, Jarlette, Nottawasaga Station. This will increase their fire flows by running a 12-inch water main from County Road 42, which will tie into our 24-inch water main, which we installed a couple of years ago now. And this will allow a greater flow to that northeast section of town. Next slide, please, Fawn. Once again, back to Lock Avenue water main. It's currently a, I believe, a 4-inch AC water main that runs along that small section. So while urbanization is going on, while we're doing sanitary and storm, we're going to replace that water main as well. It just makes sense while the project is happening. We'll tie it in to the far end of the school, and then as future development happens, it can be increased further to the east and up into Birchwood and other residents up there. Next slide, please, Fawn. Get to Creemore Mary Street water main. This is, I probably had this on the books the last 2 or 3 years. It's more of a developer driven water main replacement. This comes in about 3 different sections in the development charge study. There's 3 of the sections will be built, partially built by developers. The 4th section, which is the south end of Mary Street, leads to our sewage pump station. That will be built by the township or paid by the township. That is, if the project goes along, we'll hope to jump on with the developers just to cut costs. As a contractor set up in town doing the other 3 sections, it makes more sense to this 4th section, and that's replacing that section is basically based on providing the sewage plant with water. We would upsize the main that's there. We have had a few breaks on that water main in the last 10 years. So as I'm sure you can all imagine, losing water to a sewage treatment plant is not a great thing. So it makes sense to replace that as we replace other infrastructure along that Mary Street. Next slide, please, Fawn. Probably the big project that's happening, and you're all aware of it, is the Klondike Park water supply. Those are some numbers, some updated numbers we have from Burnside on kind of timelines in 2022 and 2023 for what's to take place there. As you can see, we're looking at about 18 million in 2022. The designs are being finished up now. We're working on permits and approvals, and we're really hoping to tender in the spring of 2022. That's the plan. Start some construction on both the well and reservoir site as well as the water main. 2023 will see the construction continue to a tune of approximately 15 million as well in 2023. There is scheduled on the books through RGB's report about $2.7 million worth of work that'll still have to take place in 2024. Of course, that's all pending that these 2 years go the way as expected as well. And we'll see what happens. There is the same as everything. There's demand, there's supply issues with certain appurtenances and parts. So we're still planning to go through this. Once we get in the tender process, we'll know further and know more if there's any delays. Next slide, please, Fawn. That's a short and sweet water section of the Public Works budget. As I said, a lot of the big items are to do with the development and replacing mains in Stainer and possibly Creemore. We have small items as far as capital life cycle costing goes. And if there's any questions anybody has on the water, I'd be happy to answer them now, or if I can't, Mike is here to steer us in the right direction as well.
Okay. Again, anybody on council would like to ask any questions? Mr. Broderick, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks for that, Todd. On the water or the Mary Street water main, what size are we going up to on that?
I believe I'd have to look at the designs again, but I believe it's an 8-inch we'd be raising to. Mike, does that ring a bell from the discussions we've had in the past?
Yeah, 250 millimeter 8-inch pipe.
Second question, are we changing the depth of it at all?
Yes, sorry, through your worship to Councillor Broderick, that will depend on whether storm sewer, with the Mary Street storm sewer, whatever has to go in there. Industry standards or township standards require a certain depth to begin with. So they will go to engineering standards, and then we'll probably have to work around some storm design as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, John. Is there anybody else on council would have any questions to Todd or the rest of the team? I don't see any. Go ahead, Todd.
Okay, we'll continue on here to the sanitary systems portion of the budget. Once again, it'll be fairly short and sweet, but you have seen first slide shows us some items of interest for the sanitary sewers. A few little upgrades at the Stainer wastewater treatment plant. Some of this stems from life cycle costing, some stems from plant operation. Currently, we are doing RJB Burnsides are doing a blower design report for us, just to check on the efficiency and the capacity that our blowers currently have. From that report, it'll give us recommendations, options to what we may need to build in the future. So there might be some design work in 2022 and possibly construction in 2023 of some blower upgrades. Brock Street sewer design in 2023. In the near future, we're going to have to anticipate upsizing or replacing our main sanitary line that runs to our current sewage pump station on Dominion Drive. As Industrial Park starts to grow, we get more areas over there where the sanitary line drops into the Brock Street line. I think it's inevitable. It's going to have to be upsized, made bigger. So we're going to do some design work in that. In 2023 is what our plan is. I think we've got a bit of time for that, but it's something we don't want to put too far out and not have it ready to go. Once again, you see the wastewater treatment plant, PLC and HMI. Once again, we're just keeping up with our life cycle on them. We don't want them to get out of date and fail on us. Something that we we have deferred the last couple of years in Stainer as our wastewater treatment plant, as our sludge haulage. That was always an item in there as needed. This time we are going to keep it consistent in the Creemore wastewater treatment plant. We leave that to the town of Collingwood. They handle it under their contract to get rid of sludge haulage as required. So we're going to work with Collingwood and have them look after sludge haulage out of the Stainer plant as well. Creemore wastewater treatment plant, we're going to do some sewer main and camera work. We've finished up our 3-year program in Stainer where we do camera work every 10 years. So now we're going to move our work to Creemore. It's been about 10 years since we've been there doing camera work. So we're going to camera all the mains in Creemore as well as flush, which is an annual event. Various plant upgrades can be based on the Blue Sky report, which I think you're aware of, testing going on at the plant for any modifications or upgrades that we might benefit from there. And the same wastewater treatment plant, HMI and PLC updates as part of our life cycle costing schedule. Next slide, please, Fawn. Once again, get into Sunnydale Street development at Manortown. There's another slide coming up here, which will talk a bit about a sewage pump station. So that's kind of why it ties in with running sanitary down Sunnydale Street. I know these are probably all well versed on what's going on there now and how we're going to run sanitary down. It will improve or help our source water protection as well. Having a main supply of our wells for the Stainer drinking water system down that street, it makes me rest a little easier knowing that we're going to go to sanitary sewers. And even though there was a lot of upgrades done on septic systems down there, they do only last so long. So this is welcome news for myself. Next slide, please, Fawn. So this is the Southeast Stainer sewage pump station and force main. So as we did, I think these are all aware that proposed pump stations in Manor Towns can be pumped back up to a manhole where it can be dropped into and gravity fed. So that's where all the Sunnydale Street sewer will run into and then be pumped back out. Next slide, please, Fawn. Margaret Phillips Street sewer main. So similar to water, this one is required by the development community in that southern part of Margaret Street, Ashton Meadows specifically or mainly. They're going to have to run some sanitary to get gravity flows over to basically Phillips Street and Mowat Street at Highway 26. So I think working together as public works now where, you know, we get urbanization of roads. You've seen a lot of examples here where while we're urbanizing a road, how old's the water main? We're looking at all those. And this is an example of doing everything at once instead of putting just a sewer main in. Let's do the water main at the same time because it benefits others as well. Next slide, please, Fawn. Once again, the capital water main for Lock Avenue, or sorry, for sewer main for Lock Avenue. There's a small section of Lock that is, while we're urbanizing, that has not got sanitary from Jonathan to 26. And there has been reports of failing septics in that area. So I think it only makes sense to install sanitary while we're doing all the other road works along there, and then have people connect. Next slide, please, Fawn. So these next couple of slides are just to give you an overview of the rates that are happening, small increases that are going on. This was obviously done back in 2019, 2020. We did our financial plan on the rate study. So as you can see there, there is going to be a slight increase from the volumetric rate per cubic meter. The next slide, please, Fawn. It talks more about an overall picture on water and sewer rates and gives you a percentage of the increase. So the sewer is a little more of an increase than the water, but overall 2022 is going to be a 3.5% increase on water and sanitary rates. And the same 2023 is 3.8%. Just to give you a general idea of where our rates are going. Next slide, please, Fawn. And that kind of ends the sanitary portion. I know I threw a slide with water and sanitary at the end, but I think it was important for you to see the rates and just see where we're at.
Thank you, Todd. I just quickly wrote that down. You said 3.5% for both as a water and sewer rate combined increase. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. I believe it works out to it's like a little over 5% for sewer, but it's a little 2% for water. So yeah, when you beld them together, it's 3.5%.
All right, thank you. Anybody with any questions to Todd? Oh, Mr. Patterson, there you are. Go ahead.
Okay, I was flagging earlier, so I'm going to go back.
Sorry, I just jump in.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I'm going to. I like to trick Todd every once in a while. Anyway.
That's okay.
Keep me on my toes.
He always is. So I asked the basic question: are we doing any storm drainage work? I couldn't see any.
So that's going to come. I wanted to keep them separate. So storm is another slide or two.
Did I miss it?
Yeah, the storm sewer is coming up. Yeah,
it's coming up.
Ah, okay.
Storm sewer. There's a bit of work there yet for us to.
So I see it in your slides, okay, but not on the sheets that we got, like the capital works.
Right.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Yes. Through your worship, Councillor Patterson. So no, Patterson, there is no physical storm drains being installed capital wise. We're going to continue with, in the next slides will show it, some work in mapping and getting our infrastructure electronically, digitally laid out, but there is no storm work proposed, unless, Dan, I'm missing something, but there's nothing big proposed.
Yeah, no, I couldn't see anything at all except.
Yeah.
So I'll reserve my questions on storm until you finish.
Okay.
Sorry to
I'll go to Dan. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, just to Councillor Patterson, any storm works that are proposed for 2022 and 2023 are combined with the urbanization. So the urbanization of Locke, urbanization of Margaret Street, urbanization of Sunnydale Street, Mowat Street, will all include storm sewer installation. There's no storm sewer there now, but there will be. So, but to Todd's point, nothing for storm sewer that is on its own. So there's no projects proposed for standalone stormwater works.
Okay, then if I may, then I will ask my question now then, because I mean it's the topic these days: flooding and environmental change. So is there a current study that you have or current plans to restudy our resilience as the weather changes and as our flood patterns change, if they are changing?
I'll leave that one for you, Dan. But
yeah, so maybe between Mike and I, we can answer it. And I think it was brought up at the last meeting, Your Worship. If I may, it goes back to I think some of the work that perhaps the NVCA can or is doing. I think Mara had mentioned something on the Stainer flood study, I believe. The Creemore drainage study is another one that, maybe the numbers do have to be looked at again. That maybe that's part of the review, the EA review is, have those numbers changed? I suspect not in the last 10 years, but those are the couple of things that I can, that comes to mind anyway, as far as a wholesome, like a wholesome drainage study, I guess. That's really the only thing that come to my mind.
One last quick point then. I've heard it at council meetings, so I'll say that we've all heard anecdotally in some detail, not much, but in some detail, that the floodplain study either has to be done or it has been done, but I haven't seen any official change or any official program that would do a floodplain review. I know that the reason even has been developers, not developers, I guess so, a developer who have asked an engineering firm to check whether or not the current floodplain map is correct. And again, anecdotally, it's come back and said, well, actually, we disagree with the floodplain. it's not exactly what it should be. So I think we've all heard things like that. So given the drive you have right now in public works towards a more database, science-based approach, question I would ask, is it worth looking into it in terms of, do we have to do one?
I gotta say, can I just jump in, Tom? I think that that's a big question, a big ask of our public works staff, given that both the NVCA and the County of Simcoe do floodplain mapping at various stages. And so I don't know if that's something that we can take on locally as a lower tier municipality, but.
No, I don't think we should take it on. It's a watershed thing. What I'm saying is it something as a municipality, let me put it up a little higher and say, we need this.
Can I jump in, Your Worship?
Please do.
So a few years ago, the NVCA reached out to us and asked Clearview if they'd like to be part of floodplain mapping study. They did some high level flood mapping on what would happen during different, 50-year, 100-year events. Provided that to us. I'd have to go back and find it. So the answer then was no. Recently, Mark Hartley had reached out and asked if we wanted to be part. So if we join a floodplain study, it would be specifically for, settlement areas like Stayner and Creemore. The NVCA would pay for part of it. Right now, the developer is required to pay for all of it. So they come to Creemore, they want to build, do your floodplain study, and you tell us where the issues are, and then the NVCA would have to review it, as would our engineers. Dan Perot is actually, the NVCA has started a program where they're working with municipalities on these types of issues. Dan has signed up for, this is going forwards in 2022 to be part of that committee, and those conversations, I'm sure, will be brought up and to the forefront. So this time next year is probably going to be part of a budget council consideration to do a floodplain mapping study. Along with that, so the province is, as council's aware, and Todd's talking about it after this slide, we have to put all of our flood, stormwater ponds and everything into one document, similar to what we've done with our water systems. Our sewer and our storm systems are going to be mapped. They're going to have plans and operations. So the province is looking at this at the 30,000 foot level, but the study itself, that wouldn't happen over Clearview wide. That the cost would be wild. But the individual towns, there's an opportunity to work with the NVCA to get us a study that we could then use to provide the developers to assist them. But that's in the future. That's not quite yet.
No, I realize.
Mr. Patterson, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I realize it's not 2022 or 2023, and it will take a while to do. I'm encouraged to hear what I think I hear is that Dan is sitting on a committee that this topic is going to come up.
Dan?
That's correct. I put my name forward. They've solicited municipalities, other disciplines as well, to start a working group on stormwater management solutions. So I've put my name forward to sit on that. They're looking to start up, I believe, early in 2022, and set that ball rolling. So if they call it stormwater management solutions. So there's lots of solutions out there, and if that were to evolve into best management practices for climate change, and those are things that probably would need to come out of that. But it may evolve into flood studies, and because every municipality, I would imagine, in their 18 municipalities probably want a flood study to be done. So they have that big picture look on what that watershed is, and how it reacts or interacts with development. So, but that it's progress. We'll see where that goes from their end, but they're spearheading something.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Good luck with that committee, Dan. Todd, how about you finish up with your last section, and then we'll have final questions to the whole department. Fire away, Todd.
Sounds great. Thank you, Worship. That's a nice little segue right into my stormwater systems portion of the presentation. So just to jump on what we've kind of discussed already. So the consolidated linear infrastructure permissions approach and new ECAs, that's something that started to come out last year. And now as of February 2022, we have to have our application into the ministry. So one of the things they did talk about is specifically what you were talking about, Councillor Patterson, with I think eventually we will have to do on a bigger scale, more studies, whether it be floodplain, drainage. And I'm hoping that with this working group, that's what it's moving towards, more of a bigger scale, not just Clearview having to do their own. And we'll see where that goes. But the ministry fully expects to see gaps in applications, missing information that they understand that townships cannot either afford, they won't have on hand right now. So once we apply, once we find our gaps, there'll probably be some more to-dos come out of it. We're going to keep moving forward with what we know. We know we have to have all of our storm mapped. We know we have to have it inputted. And this will help us to, once again, using technology and information that we have, we can base some decisions on whether it be maintenance, replacement. We had a really good summer this year with our student in mapping and GIS mapping all of our storm systems. We now have a digital version of it all, which is great. We've talked about it for years in the water and wastewater, having all of our water and wastewater systems mapped. Now we've got a lot of our storm mapped. We still will have to go back again and do some touching up, some rechecking, some linking of mapping that we might have. So we are going to put a 2022 GIS summer student in the budget again. Like I said, it was very productive and beneficial for what we had this year. If you'd like to go to the next slide, Fawn, I'll just give you a little picture of what our storm systems now look like. So every one of those blue dots is a catch basin, believe it or not. That's kind of just the heart of Stayner, the downtown core of Stayner. Until you see this on a map, you don't realize how many catch basins there is and how many storm pipes there is. It's quite impressive. So we got a lot of work to do probably going forward, but at least we're starting with something, and this is what the ministry is going to want to see when we apply for our consolidated linear infrastructure permission and our permits. Next slide, please, Fawn. So one thing, and as we talked about works that we are going to take on with stormwater, we are going to defer a couple items. Stormwater management pond cleanouts. We had two that Burnside's identified and give us pricing on. The pricing was probably high, and they admitted it, but we're going to defer 1.7 million that was proposed that we might have been looking at doing and clean out a couple stormwater management ponds to assist in keeping the budget where we need it to be. This is something we'll probably have to look at in the future, obviously, but for now, that's getting deferred. And I think as Dad had mentioned earlier too, like so other stormwater works that we are deferring is the New Lowell drainage work, I guess you'd call it. That pretty much concludes my public works portion of it, water, sanitary, and storm. Any questions on any more storm or anything else for water, sanitary, or roads?
Todd, don't go away. I'm sure there might be something for you there. Members of council, have you got any questions to wrap up this section? Flipping through cards here. Anybody? Seeing none? No? Okay. I've got a quick question for you, Todd. When you talk about deferring the stormwater pond management / cleanouts, certainly I can tell you I have had a couple of calls about a few of them, and I'm just wondering, can we get an update as to what that actual cost is going to be, even in some type of report or for information, so council can consider that in the future? I'm thinking of the pond that's at the south end of the Ottawa Elementary School, right there in the McKean subdivision. I'm also thinking of the pond that's on Country Lane here in beautiful Stayner, with the walking trail that goes around it. And the other question I have about those ponds, do we require extensive permits from various ministries to actually do any of that type of work? And is there a time limit as to when we could do some of those type of works? Given, we We haven't done a whole lot of stormwater management pond cleanouts, have we, Todd?
No, not to my knowledge, but I've only been in this role for 2 years now, but
Fair
I
enough.
haven't seen it. Your worship, if it's okay with Dan, I can answer the number question. I happen to have the cost estimate from Burnside's in front of me, and their estimate to do the 2 pond cleanouts at Donald Avenue and Country Lane was approximately 1.7 million.
Wow.
As far as timing, and I think Dan's probably better to speak on those kind of items.
Dan?
Yeah. I think
got some experience in that. Go ahead.
Little bit. Yeah. So
it's a lot. Wow.
It's a lot of money, and stormwater ponds are they're tricky beasts because first of all, you would have to determine the quantity of material that would need to come out of there. So that the pond has been designed to a certain depth and size. So then, over time, that sediment builds up and weedy material grows and it functions as it's intended to. But if they're not maintained appropriately, then yeah, you're faced with this, or over a number of years, 20 years, 25 years, 15 years. It all depends on the design. But really, the costs are the removal of that material. So whatever needs to come out of there, depending on its makeup, I'll call it, contamination. Most likely they're contaminated because people put fertilizers and oils and all the stuff that they're putting down their storm sewers, and what's leaking into the storm sewers getting into the pond eventually. So it's inevitable that there's going to be contaminants. And there are only a certain amount of places you can bring that contaminated material. That's where the real costs are. You have to dry it. You have to dig it out, dry it, take it to these places to get disposed of. So that's where a lot of the cost is. We can certainly work with RJ Burnside if council wants us to do maybe I'll call it a design brief or a brief of some sort to
sure.
Perhaps they would have to go out and survey the pond, find the original design, survey the pond, see where the sediment's at, find a volume of material that's estimated to be in those ponds, and then put a further estimate together on removal, disposal. You most likely would have to replant some materials that are disturbed with designed aquatic materials that was originally planted in there. But we can certainly do that. Get them to provide us an estimate and report back to council.
Okie dokie. Well, I'm hoping that we can have that information. It is something that does occasionally come up. Like I said, certainly in my role as mayor, I've had a lot of contact from residents over the years about it. So.
Yeah, so some municipalities, sorry, Your Worship, some municipalities have even gone as far as putting in place storm sewer utility charge, similar to water and sewer. I've known has happened in other municipalities, that there is a user rate, I'll call it, for stormwater. So because that number gets so high, and you can imagine that as we grow, we're going to have more stormwater management ponds, and this is going to need to be done more frequently with the ponds that we assume over time.
Right. And by the way, speaking of as we grow, that very point about the stormwater management ponds, I mean, we talked about the sidewalks and curbing being one of the last projects. Stormwater management ponds also one of those last projects. It gets sort of wrapped up by a developer. And it's nice to see those get cleaned up and actually installed and prepared so that when the new residents move in, as well as the residents that are nearby, that they are not impacted by it negatively, looking just like a mess. So anyway.
Typically they're actually the first things to be installed.
Oh, there you go. But they seem to be messy forever.
But they are, yeah. So they sit in a temporary state, I'll call it, until the final strokes, because we then ensure that what they're leaving us with when we assume the subdivision is what its intended design was. And so, you know, but yeah, they are around for a long time until they're finally assumed by the municipality.
Okay, well, perhaps my ask of a bit of an update and report on some of the expenses that the municipality will be facing in the future would be good information for council to have. All right, thank you. Anybody else? Oh, Mr. Lamers, I see your hand there. I don't see your face, but I see you've got the little yellow hand. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, through Todd or Dan, how many of these retention ponds do we have now? And with putting all these new subdivisions in, we're going to start assuming more and more every year.
Todd, Dan?
Yeah, through your worship, I don't have my records in front of me, but I know I do have to, and I do inspections of those at least once a year. I think there was about 6 of them. I think 6 is what we have currently. And then ponds that are either constructed or in the midst of construction or not been assumed yet. We are, we probably have 3 or 4 of those as well that we have. They're constructed, but we haven't assumed them yet. So yeah, well, and that number is just going to keep growing as well. You're right.
Thank you for the question there, Mr. Lamers.
Yeah, so you're gonna have to start putting a reserve together for these. If that's going to be the price of cleaning one out, you're going to need a big reserve at the end. I thought a lot of these subdivision owners had to take care of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they do. They construct them and they maintain them for the duration of their development. But once we assume the subdivision, it's a final assumption of the development, then we take them on. So to my point, that during the construction phase, house building, maintenance period, it is the responsibility of the developer, and then that's why we want to ensure that prior to us, the municipality, taking it over, we want to make sure that any sediment that has grown or built up over those building years is removed right prior to assumption, so that we're starting off with something, I'll call it fresh, or that they're at a place where we can take them over. And then again, based on the design of the pond, it could be up to 15, 20, 25 years before the sediment removal is required. But it is something that certainly we do need to plan for, and it's something that has been at the top of my mind since I've come aboard here, and doing those inspections of those ponds, that those 2 particular, the ones that the mayor has mentioned, have right at the top of the list.
Thank you.
The one on Donald Street, I don't know if you can consider that a pond anymore, and tell you the truth, because it is so overgrown.
I saw kids last summer walking across it, so if they're walking on water in there, I'll tell you right now. Anyway.
Thank you, Dan.
Good stuff. All right, thanks, Todd, Mike, Dan. Now listen, at this point, council, are there any questions to our 3 gentlemen and Fawn, who's also in there too, who's representing the Public Works Department? Anybody's got any questions about Public Works budget? All quiet? All right. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies. I tell you what, we're going to go to our treasurer, who's going to give us our new an update 3.5. Before she does that, I just want to caution members of council that at the end of Kelly's presentation, I'm going to call for a recess, because we've been sitting here for 3.5 hours and I need to get up. So Kelly, if you'd like to do your section, and then we'll have a brief recess, and then we'll continue with the council agenda. Go ahead, Kelly.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will be brief. I'm just going to share my screen here, I hope.
Okay.
All right, I'm hoping you have my budget presentation and not my cat.
There you go.
All right, well, these were going to be the opening remarks, and they're actually going to be the closing of the staff remarks. You've heard all the budget presentations and you've seen all the numbers, and I know they're not the numbers that we're used to. Our budgets are normally coming in at about 2%. We're not there yet. So on November 15th, when we left, we were at a net increase of 4.74%. A couple of adjustments went through. The county came in at 2%. So we're now at an average or an overall net increase of 5.01%. So what does that number mean? What that is a $56.71 overall increase for every $100,000 worth of assessment on someone's home. Now we know the values of the homes have been frozen with impact since 2016, and that will continue into 2022. So the only increased or change in assessments that people will see are going to be for new assumptions of property, new growth, things that have just come onto the rolls, or things that were actually missed in prior rolls. So the annual price index that I showed you last time, I believe CPI was at 2.95. Just checked now, and for October, we're at 4.9%. So we've got a lot of pressures driving our costs up. We've already heard Dan say that gravel across the board is going up 10%. And these are reflected in a lot of the increases that we've had to put forward. Now, the next two slides are just for council's information. This is our current debt and our proposed debt, or our expected debt coming on board over the next few years, primarily because of growth. The blue is all of the existing debt. And the yellow is the proposed debt. So we've got the joint fire hall and public works building. We've got the Stainer water solution. We've got the Creemore sewer plant. What it looks like in graph version tells you how close we're getting to our allowed debt capacity. So the top of that red line is the maximum allowed debt capacity given to us by the province. And as you can see, over the next few years, that number starts to jump up and it gets very close. So we have to balance our debt capacity with the projects that we have to do versus the ones we want to do. So again, just information for council to keep in the back of their minds. And that was it, short and sweet. Sorry, just trying to figure out how to stop sharing here now. There we go.
Muted, your worship.
There we go. We're back.
There we go. I'm muted and I was unmuted. There we go. I'm going to jump in right away, actually. Kelly, your debt capacity comment there is important because
yes,
our debt capacity, it does have a slight curve where it does increase our capacity, and that's based on growth. As we add more tax base, or as we add more income to the overall corporation, the debt capacity does go up. The challenge there is that the projects have huge price tickets on them that continue to swallow up our debt. The other side of that is that we also try to, or we do, eliminate some of those debts. And Jennifer LaChapelle mentioned that today in her presentation, that our new Lowell library project will be wrapping up in 2022 as far as our debt responsibility for that portion. So it does fluctuate a little bit. I appreciate your graph demonstrating that it is in fact climbing and projected to climb if you look at the other debt works that are out there. But given the growth that is projected for our area and anything that may come from the county's MCR review, opening up more growth for Clearview Township, our debt capacity will continue to rise, whether it's actually using the debt. So Kelly, do you have any projections on that, given if we were to continue to grow as we are, how we're going to be able to keep that graph in a healthy condition?
Absolutely, Your Worship. The numbers based on that graph are very conservative, and I will always follow that. It does take time for MPAC to actually get the growth onto our books. So while we may be taking on the debt over the next couple of years. It may be 3 to 4 years before we actually see that growth come into Clearview Township. But you are 100% right. That red line will continue to increase as new assessment comes on board and new tax dollars are available.
Okay.
Having said that, it's not something that we need to look at as far as the tax increases go, because in a lot of cases, these are all developer projects that we're having to do. There may be a 10% benefit to existing, but the loan payments will be paid by development charges for the most part. So it's not to scare council into thinking, oh my Lord, we're having a tax increase that's just going to go skyrocketing. That's just sort of to give you an idea of the projects that are coming up that we really have to stay focused on. They're our must-haves versus our, that would be nice.
Okay. All right. Sorry, I don't mean to dominate. Thank you, Council. Thank you, Kelly. Don't go away. Members of Council, you got any questions to Kelly on our last opening comment? Mr. Patterson, I see. Anybody else? Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I think you answered one of my questions, but it would be useful if you think it's significant. To have servicing the debt, you're right, most of it is non-tax funded capital works paid with DCs. How much of it will be tax funded, since it's bigger than we're used to?
I like that question. Kelly, that's a really good question.
Through your worship to Councillor Patterson.
If you don't have it now,
that information.
If you don't have it now, is it something you see off the general ledger?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Patterson, absolutely. I will pull that number for you and send it out to all of council.
Okay.
You always got to hit me with the ones I don't have in front of me.
It's the first time I've caught you. Oh, you usually have it. And I wasn't trying to catch you. I've asked this question a couple of different ways. I noticed that we show every year, it's not new this year, that we do provide the impact of the increase in revenue from our tax base. And I'm assuming that's all our classes. This year, because we're actually talking about growth and significant growth, it's something I've been trying to pay more attention to. I know what you just said, and you said it the last time we met, that the impact is the lag in revenue realized after the home is occupied is because of the impact assessments. Right now, you're estimating 200,000. And if I look at the average home price, I'm going to just say 2,500. You're talking 80 homes. For that, is that the expectation that that would be homes that were built in 2019 and maybe that far back, but 2021 and 2020 that we're expecting to realize the revenue from?
Through your worship to Councillor Patterson, yes, that's exactly it.
And
so
nothing
it's new builds. It has nothing to do with the existing assessment. So when MPAC does the reassessment on the values of the homes, that doesn't affect, it doesn't generate more tax revenue for us. It just sort of spreads it out differently in our base. When we get new growth assessment, and that is correct, I am estimating 200,000. I am hoping that it's higher, but for 2021, it was only 209,000. So I don't want to go any higher than that as an opening estimate. Those numbers should be coming into me within the next couple of weeks. I usually have them by the end of November, and they're a little bit lagged this year. I'll have a better projection of what the actual tax increase is, because that comes right off any additional funding we need.
Do all our tax classes rise the same, or because of the phenomena that's happened in our area, the rapid increase in tax assessments, which normally, if tax assessments, if they rise equally across classes and all the units in that class rise the same, there's no increase in taxes. But sometimes, well, look at in Creemore. When we finally get an assessment, will we start to see a mix of residential housing rise different than the others? Like, for example, townhouse versus a rebuilt $1 million home on Mill Street? And same with rural estate properties now going sky high. Will we start to see a mix within the class?
Through your worship to Councillor Patterson, I'm not sure you'll see a mix within the class. I think the real estate prices are pretty much staying pretty consistent, obviously huge increases.
Yeah.
Where we run into problems is the fact that, and I think it's pretty close to 80% of our tax base is residential or
Right.
is farm. And because industrial and commercial are taxed at a higher rate, when those ones start to increase at a rapid rate, that's when residential will start to find that their taxes are falling because they
Right.
take up a bigger chunk.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in Clearview, we don't have that large base. So the majority of our tax increase is borne by our residential taxpayers.
Yeah.
I do expect that to rise fairly consistently within the residential class base.
Okay, yeah, okay. Could we have a copy of our current reserve accounts, or is it?
Yes. And again, if it wasn't for the Zoom, I'd have brought it up on screen. I must have tried 15 ways to Sunday to try and figure out how to get that spreadsheet on the screen so that you could actually read it. And it was next to impossible. But what I can do is print out hard copies for council and have those available for you for the next meeting.
And
thank you. That would be excellent.
Yeah. Do you have, are you going to provide us with anything beyond 2023? And if so, where are projects? The one I'm interested, obviously, is 26, 27, pending all the procedures around it. Do you have that slotted in any future year yet?
Through your worship to Councillor Patterson, that one has always been in the budget right from the very beginning. And predates me. I'm honestly not sure which year it was. I believe 2018, maybe a little bit earlier. It's always been on the budget books. It just sort of carries forward. We don't have it slotted in for an expected year of completion, mostly because we have no idea.
Yeah, yeah. So it's clearly not in 23 right now. Yeah, okay. All right. Those are my questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Patterson. Does anybody else have any questions? All right, Kelly, just to confirm, you are going to provide us with a full accounting or printout, I guess, of the reserve accounts. And in that reserve account report, would you be able to advise any incremental increases that are programmed as a result? I know we talked briefly about the hospital increase. That's a programmed increase. Can we make sure that that's at least noted somewhere, that there are some that have pre-prescribed increases that are already programmed? So I'm hoping that report will be really helpful, and you'll be able to print that up and have it put in the councillors' hard copy boxes here in the mayor's office.
Absolutely, your worship.
Right on.
We actually only have two preset increase reserve transfers, and that is the Collingwood General Marine Hospital, which goes up 50,000 each year, and then the affordable senior housing was at 150 for years 1 and 2, and is scheduled to go to 250,000 this year. The rest of the reserve transfers stay.
All right, we only have two.
Level.
Good. I'm glad to hear that, because I didn't know that. I wasn't completely up to date on that. So thank you for that. All right. Anyway, I hope that you can have those printed along with the map. I believe Fawn will work with you as well to prepare that one map that needed to be done. So maybe you guys can coordinate and get that delivered. Did I see another card? Tom, was that your card? Yes. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, just a quick one. I thought we also had the tree urban canopy renewal fund.
Through your worship to Councillor Patterson, yes, but that one's a set amount at $50,000 per year. It doesn't increase each year.
I see. Yes.
Yeah. I was looking for, because the growth in our reserves is kind of something we need to pay attention to. I mean, you heard Dan speaking about our equipment reserve. He's asking for an increase this year, But is that something that we need to now prescribe, given the cost of these vehicles? Like that's why I'm asking these type of questions. Okay, anybody else? All right, council. The next portion of the meeting is about having questions and comments and proposals, amendments, subtractions, additions, discussion about the budget coming from council. I am, however, going to ask for a recess, and it is 5 minutes to 4. So I'm going to ask that we're all back at 5 minutes after 4. 10 minutes, if I may, for a recess at this time. Everybody